Chapter 828. Long Qing hadn't seen Qianling and didn't have any news about him. To put it bluntly, Long Qing had been living in the West Sea all these years and hadn't interacted with anyone from the heavenly Qin continent. There was still no news about Qianling and Shaoqing. As such, Shaoqing could only give up. Then, Shaoqing introduced Shaoxing to Long Qing. When she saw Shaoxing, Long Qing's expression changed and she exclaimed in surprise. "Little brother, he isn't." Long Qing had seen Shaoxing before, but wasn't he already dead in the heavenly Qin continent? So why did he appear here now? Shaoqing wasn't surprised by Long Qing's surprise. He briefly explained what had happened to Long Qing. After Long Qing understood the whole story, he came back to his senses and said with a sigh, "You're right. I see. In that case, Senior still has a chance to be resurrected." "Yes, there is. And it should be soon." Shaoqing nodded in response. "Little girl, your dragon bloodline is very rich. It seems like you're one of the top pure-blooded dragons," Shaoxing said with a smile after Shaoqing finished his sentence. Shaoxing had never seen a pure-blooded dragon before, so he was rather interested in Long Qing. However, Long Qing's attitude towards Shaoxing instantly turned cold. Of course, this coldness was entirely due to Long Qing's personality. As a pure-blooded dragon, Long Qing didn't care about any other race. This was a pride that went deep into her bones. Perhaps only in front of Shaoqing would Long Qing show this intimate side of her. Even when facing Qianling, Long Qing's attitude was indifferent. There was no intimacy at all. After being brushed off by Long Qing, Shaoxing didn't continue to flatter her. However, Shaoxing still looked at Shaoqing with jealousy. He thought to himself, just how lucky is this kid? Not only does he have the ice goddess physique and the moon goddess physique, but even his second sister is a pure-blooded dragon and is extremely intimate with Shaoqing. It should be known that it was almost impossible for a pure-blooded dragon to be intimate with a human being. However, Shaoqing did it. They chatted for a while and soon returned to their rooms one after another. Of course, Shaoqing still shared a room with Qin Shuru. The matter seemed to have been resolved. Shaoqing also planned to take Long Qing to the 100,000 Fire territory. However, in the early morning of the next day, when Shaoqing was about to leave, Jun Tong suddenly came with several experts of the Sun Saint sect, saying that they wanted to search. When the Sun Saint sect wanted to search the Ancient Saint sect's residence, the half-saint deacon of the Ancient Saint sect immediately told Shaoqing about it. Hearing this, Shaoqing smiled slightly. He wasn't worried at all. He even directly took Qin Shuru and Long Qing to the main hall to meet Jun Tong together. He wasn't afraid that his and Long Qing's identities would be exposed. Last night, Shaoqing used the disguise technique. In such a short time, Shaoqing was sure that Jun Tong couldn't detect any flaws, let alone see through his disguise. As for Long Qing, she had already turned into a human. As long as she didn't activate the power of her bloodline, her identity wouldn't be exposed. In Jun Tong's eyes, Long Qing was also a human being. Jun Tong strode into the main hall with the two women. Seeing Shaoqing coming, Jun Tong was stunned at first. She looked at Qin Shuru and Long Qing beside Shaoqing in amazement. It had to be said that Jun Tong was also attracted by the appearance of the two women. Qin Shuru was cold, while Long Qing was domineering. The two women with completely different temperaments stood together, but their appearance was equally stunning. It really made Jun Tong absent-minded for a moment. However, Jun Tong was a holy son, after all. His composure was naturally not comparable to that of ordinary people. Although he was stunned, he quickly recovered. He looked at Shaoqing with a smile on his face and spoke in an extremely friendly manner. "This must be junior brother Shaoqing. I've heard so much about you. Today, I finally get to meet you." Obviously, before coming, Jun Tong had made some preparations. She also knew that Shaoqing was in West Sea City at this time. It was just that she didn't see Shaoqing last night. Hearing Jun Tong's words, Shaoqing also pretended to smile and said, "Senior brother is too polite. May I know why senior brother is here today?" Xiaochen didn't have the slightest guilty conscience because he knew that Juntong definitely didn't see any flaws. Sure enough, seeing Xiaochen's indifferent face, Juntong didn't have the slightest doubt and just said, "It's like this. Junior brother Xiao should also have heard about the beast attack last night, right?" I heard, but weren't they easily defeated by senior brother?" Hearing this, Xiaochen replied, The beast horde has indeed been beaten back, but the dragon that organized the monster beast attack has escaped. Moreover, according to senior brother's guess, she should not have left West Sea City yet, she has only turned into human form to hide." Xiaochen asked with a smile, "Senior brother, are you saying that I was the one who hit him?" "Ha, junior brother, you must be joking. I was just casually asking." Juntong laughed. In fact, the purpose of Juntong's visit today was very obvious. He wanted to search the ancient sacred sect's residence. He was afraid that the people of the ancient sacred sect had hidden the pure-blood dragon. After all, the temptation of a pure-blood dragon was not ordinary. Its body was full of treasures. Even a saint would be jealous. Xiaochen had already guessed the purpose of Juntong's visit. He pretended to be friendly and chatted for a while. Then, Xiaochen simply agreed to Juntong's search. After all, he could not find anything. He didn't have the slightest intention of stopping him. Facing Xiaochen's calmness, Juntong secretly guessed that the dragon was really not in the hands of the ancient sacred sect. Although he had doubts in his heart, Juntong still ordered the search. Seeing was believing. If the dragon was really not in the hands of the ancient sacred sect, then it would save a lot of trouble. Watching Juntong and the others begin the search, Xiaochen sat in the main hall with a calm face. He knew very well that the more he stopped Juntong at this time, the more confused he would be. Anyway, Longqing was beside him. Even if Juntong dug 3 feet into the ground, he would certainly not find any clues. Juntong searched inside and out, but as Xiaochen had expected, she found nothing. Eventually, Juntong came to the main hall and saluted Xiaochen with her hands folded. "Junior brother, please forgive me. I have no choice. When you come to the ancient sacred sect in the future, I will personally apologize." Since they didn't find anything, Juntong took the initiative to apologize. Hearing this, Xiaochen waved his hand indifferently and said, "Senior brother is too polite. In that case, junior brother won't keep senior brother any longer. To be honest, junior brother is planning to leave West Sea City today." "Oh? Junior brother is leaving today? Where are you going?" Hearing this, Juntong pretended to be curious and asked. Chapter 5, Seeking Collection, Seeking Monthly Votes, Seeking Recommendation. Chapter 829. Hearing that Xiaochen was leaving West Sea City today, Juntong pretended to be concerned. Hearing this, Xiaochen smiled and said, "I won't hide it from senior brother. I came to the Sun Saint province this time to train in the 100,000 Flames domain." Xiaochen bluntly stated his destination. Regarding this, there was no need to hide it. In any case, when he appeared in the 100,000 Flames domain, Juntong would definitely be the first to know if he wanted to. Acting was naturally a mixture of truth and falsehood. In the end, if you lied, you might end up making a fool of yourself. Sure enough, after hearing Xiaochen's words, the last bit of doubt in Juntong's heart vanished like smoke. Juntong didn't have any opinion about Xiaochen going to the 100,000 Flames domain. Although the 100,000 Flames domain was one of the 4 great death zones of the Sky River continent, like the Wind Plain, it was also one of the places where many cultivators went to train. Frankly speaking, the 100,000 Flames domain was even more popular than the Wind Plain. After all, the 100,000 Flames domain had the effect of tempering one's body. Just this point alone was enough to attract many people. After knowing that Xiaochen was leaving West Sea City today, the two chatted casually for a while. In the end, Juntong said with a smile, "In that case, I won't disturb junior brother. When this matter is over, junior brother must come to the Sun Saint sect. At that time, senior brother will treat you well as an apology for today's disturbance. Senior brother is too polite. If there is time, junior brother will definitely pay a visit." Hearing this, Xiaochen also replied with a smile. Then, Juntong left with his people. After Juntong left, Longqing, who had been indifferent all this time, said with an unhappy face, "Humph, junior brother, why are you talking so much with such a person? If it were up to me, I would have directly attacked him. In any case, this is our territory. Just kill him." Longqing was obviously still filled with murderous intent towards Juntong. Xiaochen shook his head and smiled bitterly. His second sister was really. If he hadn't specifically warned her beforehand, perhaps she would have taken action just now. How could killing Juntong be so simple? If a holy son could be killed so easily, then it would be too much. Qin Yu had once told Xiaochen that the holy sons of the Tiana continent were difficult to kill even if they were half-step sages. After all, as holy sons, they had too many means, especially life-saving means. It was precisely because he knew that it was difficult to kill a holy son that Xiaochen had never thought of doing anything to Juntong. Now, he had completely dispelled the worries in his heart. Going to the 100,000 Flames territory was already the best result. As for Juntong, if he wanted to find Longqing, he would continue to search in West Sea City. After searching for a while, he would naturally give up. Without further delay, Xiaochen informed the half-step sage deacon of the West Sea City encampment. Then, they directly stepped onto the transmission array and headed for the 100,000 Flames territory. There was a transmission array from West Sea City that led to the core of the Sacred Sun continent, but it couldn't go directly to the 100,000 Flames territory. They could only go to the main city of the Sacred Sun continent, Yanyan City, and then go to the 100,000 Flames territory from there. Yanyan City was the largest city in the Sacred Sun continent. At the same time, it was directly under the jurisdiction of the Sacred Sun sect. Therefore, Yanyan City had always been called the main city of the Sacred Sun continent. There wasn't the slightest obstruction, and Juntong didn't secretly obstruct them. Obviously, he had completely dispelled his suspicions about Xiaochen. Therefore, the group smoothly arrived at Yanyan City through the transmission array of West Sea City. Compared to a small border city like West Sea City, the prosperity of Yanyan City was breathtaking. Not only was there a cauldron of voices, but there were also countless kinds of pavilions and lofts. Moreover, all the houses in Yanyan City were fiery red. From afar, it looked like a huge ball of fire was burning on the ground. As the main city of the Sacred Sun continent, Yanyan City gathered cultivators from all over the Sacred Sun continent. Of course, the business here was also very developed. Not only could one buy things native to the Sacred Sun continent, but one could also buy treasures unique to the Sacred Sun continent and the ancient Sacred Sun continent. Even the Origin Wind Pill, which was a specialty of the ancient Sacred Sun continent, was sold by Xiaochen. There were people coming and going on the streets. Of course, Xiaochen was no longer the silly boy who had just arrived in the Heavenly River continent. Over the years, Xiaochen's knowledge and experience had been constantly increasing. Therefore, when faced with the prosperity of Yanyan City, Xiaochen didn't feel anything special. After all, there were cities comparable to Yanyan City in the ancient Sacred Sun continent, so there was no need to be surprised. Xiaochen was very calm, but Qin Shuru and Longqing were a little troublesome. One was cold, the other overbearing. These two women actually began to stroll around excitedly when faced with the prosperity of Yanyan City. Of course, the two women didn't pay attention to the treasures used for cultivation. Instead, they paid attention to some women's items, such as rouge, face powder, hairpins, clothes, and so on. The two women could be said to be very happy shopping. Looking at these two beauties, they were like ordinary girls at this time, chatting and laughing while choosing the things they liked. Although their temperament was still unapproachable, there was a hint of womanly charm in them. In this regard, Xiaochen was helpless because the two women didn't listen to him at all. On the other hand, Xiaochen chuckled and teased them. It seems that no matter how cold a woman is, she still has no resistance to shopping. I say, boy, do you still plan to go to the 100,000 Fire Domain today? Or do you want to stay in Yanyan City for the night? Hearing Xiaoxing's words, Xiaochen said helplessly, "Look at you, can you still leave tonight?" Originally, Xiaochen planned to go directly to the 100,000 fire domain, but now it seemed that he couldn't. With Qin Shuru and Long Qing's attitude, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to leave today even if he wanted to. They strolled through one store after another. At the same time, the two women's storage rings were filled up at an astonishing speed. All kinds of rouge, face powder, heavy and exquisite hairpins, and even some beautiful accessories. The two women didn't know how much they bought. Of course, the two women had no concept of money at all. Just like now, Long Qing walked directly into a clothing store, looked around, then waved her hand, and all the clothes in the store were put into her storage ring. Then, she directly bid 100 spirit stones and strode away. Seeing this scene, Xiaochen was speechless. Did this woman use spirit stones to buy clothes? It was a complete waste of heaven's goods. One had to know that these clothes were just ordinary clothes. There was no need to use spirit stones to buy them at all. Gold coins would be enough. However, this woman actually directly gave 100 spirit stones to someone else. Xiaochen was speechless as he followed behind the two women. Just as he was feeling listless, Long Qing's cold voice suddenly came from the front. "Scram!" Hearing Long Qing's cold voice, Xiaochen raised his head and looked over. For a moment, a smile flashed across his eyes. Was there really someone who wasn't afraid of death here? He even dared to flirt with Long Qing. Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me. Chapter 830. Looking over, Xiaochen saw a young man in the Sun Saint sect's personal disciple uniform blocking the way of Long Qing and Long Qing. At this time, he was saying something to Long Qing with a flattering face, while Long Qing was glaring at him with a livid face. A mere personal disciple was undoubtedly an ant-like existence in Long Qing's eyes. However, such an ant actually shamelessly boasted that he wanted Long Qing to be his woman. How could Long Qing not be angry? She already had an impulse to attack, but Xiaochen strode over to Long Qing first and looked at the Sun Saint sect's disciple. "You're not my second sister's cup of tea. Hurry up and leave." Xiaochen did not let Long Qing attack. After all, Long Qing's identity as a member of the Dragon Clan could not be exposed. However, the Sun Saint sect's personal disciple was obviously reckless. Hearing Xiaochen's words, the disciple's face darkened and he immediately shouted in a deep voice. "Boy, who are you? Get out of here." Since he was not wearing the ancient sky robe, the disciple could not recognize Xiaochen's identity. Hearing this, Xiaochen smiled helplessly. He could feel that the personal disciple's cultivation was at the Dao transformation stage. Obviously, he had received the heritage of the Sun Saint sect. Perhaps it was because he had received the heritage that his strength had soared a lot, so the disciple became arrogant. However, his cultivation was not enough in Xiaochen's eyes. Without bothering to talk nonsense, Xiaochen directly slapped out. Seeing that Xiaochen dared to attack, the disciple's face instantly darkened to the extreme. Although he reacted immediately and raised his hand to block, unfortunately, with his strength, how could he block Xiaochen's attack? He easily broke through the disciple's defense and slapped the disciple's face. With a bang, the disciple was sent flying. They didn't care about such a small interlude. In the eyes of Xiaochen and the other two, this personal disciple of the Sun Saint clan was nothing but a fly that they could easily swat to death. As for him coming to make trouble, Xiaochen was even less afraid. He believed that the Sun Saint clan wouldn't offend him for a personal disciple. After dealing with this person, Qin Shuru and Long Qing continued to stroll around. However, perhaps because they had lost interest, the two women returned home not long after. Seeing that it was getting late, Xiaochen and his group could only stay in Yanyang City for the night and find an inn to stay in. After a silent night, early the next morning, Xiaochen and his group hurried to the 100,000 Flames territory. They directly stepped into the transportation array and didn't encounter any obstruction. However, just after Xiaochen and the others left through the teleportation formation, the personal disciple who was slapped away by Xiaochen the day before walked out from the corner. After listening to the report of a young man beside him, the disciple sneered. Going to the 100,000 Flames territory? Very good, you dare to hit me. This young master will definitely make you regret it. As he spoke, the personal disciple also took the transportation array and headed to the 100,000 Flames territory. This personal disciple clearly bore a grudge against Xiao Chen. At the same time, he also coveted Long Qing's appearance. He simply couldn't forget such a beautiful woman. However, he wasn't a fool. Yesterday, Xiao Chen had sent him flying with a slap. He already knew that Xiao Chen's strength was definitely far above his, so he didn't foolishly act rashly. Instead, he chose to follow Xiao Chen and his group to the 100,000 Flames territory. Unaware that the personal disciple had followed them to the 100,000 Flames territory, Xiao Chen and his group had already arrived at a small city on the outskirts of the 100,000 Flames territory. It was called Skyfire City. Skyfire City was specially built for the 100,000 Flames territory. Most of the cultivators who came and went in the city were people who came to the 100,000 Flames territory. Of course, most of them were disciples of the local forces of the Sun Saint sect, especially the Sun Saint sect disciples. Compared to Yanyang City, Skyfire City was much smaller. Moreover, it couldn't be said to be bustling. The people coming and going on the streets looked hurried. It was still early, so Xiao Chen planned to go directly to the 100,000 Flames territory. Qin Shuru and Long Qing naturally wouldn't refuse. Thus, the group directly rushed out of Skyfire City. It was very close to the 100,000 Flames territory from Skyfire City. It only took less than an hour. They left the city without any obstructions. After traveling for an hour, Xiao Chen and his group finally arrived at the outskirts of the 100,000 Flames territory. As far as the eye could see, the 100,000 Flames territory was simply a sea of fire. There was no end to the sea of fire. The flames enveloped the land and hadn't been extinguished for thousands of years. Because of the existence of the 100,000 Flames territory, the surrounding temperature was ridiculously high. Even cultivators with cultivation like Xiao Chen could feel the scorching heat. Just like the Wind Plains, if one wanted to enter the 100,000 Flames territory, they also had to rely on the power of a talisman. Naturally, Xiao Chen had already prepared for this. He took out 3 talismans. After the 3 of them used them, they stepped into the 100,000 Flames territory. This talisman was called the Sacred Flame Talisman. It was also a saint-level talisman. With this talisman, one could pass through the 100,000 Flames territory unimpeded. After entering the 100,000 Flames territory, Xiao Chen seemed to have walked into a time of flames. Looking at the raging flames around him, Xiao Chen was very interested in the 4 great deathlands of the Tiana continent. He wanted to know how they were formed. This time, Xiao Chen's purpose in coming to the 100,000 Flames territory was very clear. It was to break through the tempered battle body. Therefore, they didn't stop at the outskirts. The group went directly to the core area, where the heavenly flames were. While Xiao Chen and his group were heading to the core area of the 100,000 Flames territory, the personal disciple who had been following Xiao Chen also learned that they had entered the 100,000 Flames territory. With a sneer on his face, the personal disciple said fiercely, "Boy, I don't care who you are, but you are dead meat." As he said that, the personal disciple hurriedly came to an inconspicuous small courtyard in Skyfire City. Although the courtyard looked inconspicuous, the personal disciple was very respectful when he entered. He cautiously walked to the backyard. At the same time, in the backyard, a young man wearing the robe of the Sun Saint sect's prospective Holy Son was meditating with his eyes closed. He respectfully came to the prospective Holy Son and didn't dare to disturb him. After waiting for about half an hour, the prospective Holy Son slowly opened his eyes and said indifferently, "What's the matter?" "Senior brother, junior brother, the personal disciple obviously came to ask for help." He wasn't a match for Xiao Chen, so he could only ask the prospective Holy Son of the Sun Saint sect to take action. Therefore, he told the story with exaggerated details. Hearing this, the prospective Holy Son said indifferently, "Go and keep an eye on them. If they leave the 100,000 Flames territory, just inform me. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 831. The young man's name was Li Changle, and he was the first candidate of the Sun Saint sect. Hearing his words, the Sun Saint sect's direct disciple's face lit up, and he respectfully left the small courtyard. He didn't know that this direct disciple of the Sun Saint sect had already found Li Changle. After this direct disciple left, a middle-aged man dressed in simple clothes and with bruises on his face cautiously walked into the courtyard and cupped his hands towards Li Changle as he spoke. "Young master, everything is ready." Li Changle did not reply to the middle-aged man's words. Instead, he stood up slightly and walked out of the courtyard. However, when he passed by the middle-aged man, Li Changle stopped. Without saying anything, he directly slapped the middle-aged man in the face. His tone was still extremely indifferent as he spoke. "If you can't even do such a simple thing in the future, you can kill yourself if there's a next time." After speaking, Li Changle didn't wait for the middle-aged man's reply and directly left the small courtyard. Following Li Changle's departure, a hint of unwillingness and stubbornness flashed across the middle-aged man's eyes. However, it quickly disappeared and was replaced by a lifeless appearance. It was as if he had become a walking corpse. If Xiaoqin was here, he would definitely be furious. This was because the middle-aged man was none other than his father, Xiaoqing. He didn't know why Xiaoqing had become Li Changle's servant, but it wasn't hard to tell from the brief scene that Xiaoqing wasn't doing well. Under Li Changle's command, Xiaoqing wasn't even a servant, but more like a slave. Of course, Xiaoqin didn't know all of this. At this moment, Xiaoqin had already led Qin Shuru and Longqing deep into the 100,000 fire territory. They didn't stop at the periphery and went straight to the core of the 100,000 fire territory. In terms of size, the 100,000 fire territory wasn't as large as the Wind Plains. Therefore, it only took Xiaoqin and the others a day to enter the core of the 100,000 fire territory. In addition, the location of the heavenly fire wasn't difficult to find, so it didn't take much effort for Xiaoqin and the others to find the location of the heavenly fire. A circular fireball, about 100 meters in diameter, was suspended in the air, surrounded by raging flames that were several feet high. This was the source of the heavenly fire, and the temperature here was much higher than anywhere in the 100,000 fire territory. Looking at the heavenly fire in front of him, Xiaoqing's figure floated out of Xiaoqin's body and said calmly, "Boy, it's very dangerous to temper your body with the heavenly fire. You must be careful. In order to break through the refined physique's second level, Jade Viscera, one must use heavenly flames to refine their body. However, using this method was very dangerous. The slightest carelessness would result in one being incinerated into nothingness." Xiaoqin nodded seriously when he heard Xiaoqing's words. He knew that he could not afford to be careless while tempering his body with the heavenly fire. They didn't need heavenly fires, but they didn't need heavenly fires. Was. Of course, it was still possible to use the flames around the heavenly fire to temper their bodies. After all, there were only benefits and no disadvantages. Xiaoqin was about to enter the heavenly fire after he was done with his preparations. However, at that moment, a figure slowly emerged from the heavenly fire hovering in the sky. Xiaoqin and the others frowned slightly when they saw the figure. There was someone inside the heavenly fire? They didn't think of this at all. Because it was just a vague figure, they didn't know who it was. But not long after, the figure slowly walked out of the heavenly fire and appeared in front of Xiaoqin and the others. Xiaoqin was afraid at first because he didn't know the person's identity. But when he saw the person's face, Xiaoqin was stunned. "Big brother?" After being stunned for a while, Xiaoqin called out with uncertainty. Hearing Xiaoqin's words, the young man who walked out of the heavenly fire also came back to his senses. A smile appeared on his face. He then leaped up and came directly in front of Xiaoqin, saying excitedly, "Third brother, and second sister? What are you doing here?" The person who walked out of the heavenly fire was Chen Ling. They didn't expect to meet Chen Ling here. After the initial shock, the three of them hugged each other happily. After hugging for a while, Xiaochen asked Qinling, "Big brother, what are you doing here?" "Oh, I came here half a year ago to use the heavenly fire to cultivate. I was just about to leave, but I didn't expect you to come." Qinling was also here to use the heavenly fire to cultivate. However, he didn't use the heavenly fire to temper his body. Instead, he used it to recover his cultivation. Qinling's cultivation method was very special. Xiaochen knew this, so Xiaochen didn't continue to ask him. After chatting for a while, Xiaochen noticed that Qinling's cultivation had also reached the beginning of the Tao Master realm. He was the same as Longqing and himself. Xiaochen had an opportunity and Longqing had the bloodline of the dragon tribe. However, Qinling's cultivation wasn't slower than the two of them. Xiaochen and Longqing weren't surprised. After all, the two of them knew that Qinling was the reincarnation of a powerful person. His cultivation speed was already heaven-defying. In other words, Qinling wasn't cultivating at all. He was recovering. It was even more unbelievable that Xiaochen could catch up with Qinling's recovery speed. Therefore, after noticing that Xiaochen's cultivation had also reached the beginning of the Tao Master realm, Qinling was surprised. "Third brother, it seems that you've had a lot of opportunities over the years. You've already reached the beginning of the Tao Master realm." Qinling looked at Xiaochen and said with a smile. Xiaochen's cultivation speed shocked Qinling. In response, Xiaochen just smiled and briefly described his experience over the years. After talking about his experience, Xiaochen looked at Qinling and asked, "By the way, big brother, where have you been all these years?" "Me? At first, I was sent to the Heaven Saint continent and cultivated there for a few years. Then, I came to the Sun Saint sect. Along the way, I cultivated on my own and didn't join any of the local sects in the Tiana continent. This time, I came to the 100,000 Flames territory to cultivate." Hearing this, Qinling replied. Just like Longqing, Qinling had spent the past few years alone, crossing 2 continents. Hearing this, Xiaochen also knew that as the reincarnation of a powerful figure, Qinling was almost the same as Longqing. He didn't need anyone to teach him. As long as he had enough spiritual qi, he could continue to break through his cultivation. Qinling's experience was very simple, but they were naturally quite happy to meet here. After chatting for a while, Xiaochen finally said to Qinling, "Big brother, this time you don't have to leave. After my physical body breaks through, you can come back to the ancient saint sect with us. Something big will happen in the Tiana continent soon. If we stay together, we can take care of each other. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 832. Xiaochen took the initiative to invite Qinling. Previously, Longqing had already agreed with Xiaochen that after the Sun Saint sect matter was over, Longqing would follow Xiaochen back to the ancient saint sect. Now that he had met Qinling, Xiaochen naturally would not let him act alone. After all, the demon race was about to arrive. He did not say what was going to happen. After all, Xiaoxing had already said that the matter of the demon race should not be made public for the time being. Otherwise, it would cause panic, which would not be good. Therefore, Xiaochen only said that something big was going to happen, but did not say what it was exactly. However, after hearing Xiaochen's words, Qinling smiled and said, "Third brother, are you talking about the demon race?" Xiaochen did not say it, but Qinling knew. Hearing this, Xiaochen was slightly stunned. Not only Xiaochen, even Qin Shuru and Xiaoxing were the same. Other than the saints, no one knew that the demon race was about to invade. Even a holy son like Qinyu did not know, but how did Qinling know? It was impossible that the saints had told him. After all, Qinling was alone and was not a disciple of the ancient saint sect. Facing the doubts of the few people, Qinling explained unhurriedly. "I can feel it. Although the demon qi coming from the Saintine sect is not strong, I can still feel it." Indeed, no one told Qinling had come out on his own. Of course, saying that he felt it was actually nonsense. The reason why Qinling knew that the demon race was about to attack was entirely because he was not unfamiliar with the demon race. In fact, it could be said that he understood it very well. It was precisely because of this understanding that Qianling sensed that the demon race was about to attack from the clues. After hearing Qianling's words, although he knew that it was just a perfunctory answer, Xiaoqian did not pursue the matter. He took the initiative to change the topic and said, "Since Big Brother already knows, then follow us back to the ancient saint sect." "Alright, when you're done, we'll return to the ancient sacred sect together." Qianling agreed very readily when he heard Xiaoqian's words. Seeing that Qianling had agreed, Xiaoqian smiled and said a few words to Xiaosheng, Qin Shuru, and Long Qing before entering the heavenly flame. After handing Qin Shuru and Long Qing over to Qianling and Xiaosheng to take care of, Xiaoqian began to temper his body with heavenly fire in order to break through the second layer of the tempered body, the Jade Organ's realm. After Xiaoqian entered the heavenly fire, Qianling also suggested that Qin Shuru and Long Qing use the flames outside the heavenly fire to temper their bodies. This was beneficial to the two women. Naturally, the two women would not reject Qianling's suggestion. Then, they found two places outside the heavenly fire to sit down and close their eyes to cultivate. Xiaoqian, Qin Shuru, and Long Qing began to cultivate one after another. As a result, only Qianling and Xiaosheng were left with nothing to do. Xiaosheng was only a strand of Saint Soul, so it was impossible for him to withstand the tempering of the heavenly fire. Qianling had already completed the cultivation of the heavenly fire, so there was no need for him to continue. The two of them had nothing to do, and Qianling did not seem too surprised when he saw Xiaosheng. In response, Xiaosheng took the initiative to ask, "You've seen me before in the heavenly Qin continent, right?" "Yes, I've seen you before." Hearing this, Qianling did not hide it and nodded frankly. "Then you're not surprised?" Xiaosheng asked. "There's nothing to be surprised about. As long as a strand of Saint Soul is not destroyed, there's hope of resurrection. Although the hope is very slim, it's not impossible," Qianling said. Qianling seemed to have guessed everything. Regarding this, Xiaosheng was also curious. From the first time he saw Qianling, Xiaosheng felt that there was something strange about Qianling. His movements did not seem like the style of the younger generation. Moreover, there was a faint power of law surrounding Qianling. It seemed like they were chatting casually, but after a while, Xiaosheng suddenly thought of something. He looked at Xiaosheng and said with a smile, "I know. You must have been reincarnated through possession, right? Some almighty figures with exceedingly high cultivation had the ability to be reincarnated through possession. Although in this way, they would lose all their cultivation, but their memories could be preserved." Xiaosheng had once seen such an introduction in an ancient book. Moreover, there were records of almighty figures being reincarnated through possession in the Tiana continent. However, in order to be reincarnated through possession, one's cultivation had to at least reach the quasi-saint realm. Saints could not be reincarnated through possession. In other words, Qianling's cultivation in his previous life had at least reached the quasi-saint realm. Xiaosheng had seen through Qianling's secret. Regarding this, Qianling was not surprised. He only smiled slightly and said, "That's all in the past. It's not worth mentioning." He did not deny Xiaosheng's guess, but Qianling did not want to be entangled in this matter too much. Xiaosheng naturally would not pursue this matter. However, after confirming that Qianling was an almighty reincarnated person, Xiaosheng felt like he had been cursed. Xiaoqian did not know what to say. Motherf ****, why were the people around him all so abnormal? Also, how could there be so many geniuses in the Tianqin continent all of a sudden? It should be known that not to mention the women around Xiaoqian, the ice god physique and the moon god physique were the top special physiques in any continent. With such special physiques, as long as the two women did not die, they would definitely become strong. This was a matter of certainty, and it was also the blessing of the heavens for them. Other than the two women, Xiaoqian's brother and sister, one was a pure-blooded dragon, and the other was the reincarnation of an almighty who had at least reached the quasi-saint realm. In fact, Xiaosheng guessed that Qianling's previous life was not just a quasi-saint. It was very likely that he was even more terrifying than a quasi-saint. It was not an exaggeration to say that the people around Xiaochen were simply more terrifying than the one before. Furthermore, Xiaochen could clearly feel that when everyone was together, Xiaochen was the center. Even Qianling, the reincarnation of an almighty, similarly listened to Xiaochen's words. Just how strong did a person's luck have to be able to gather such a group of monsters around him? It should be known that Qianling, Longqing, and the others would definitely reach the level of a saint within a few years. Xiaosheng's heart was filled with doubts. As if he had seen through his thoughts, Qianling, who was at the side, seemed to be talking to himself. Third brother is a person with great luck. Furthermore, for us to be together with third brother, it can be said that it is fate. Therefore, regardless of whether it is me or second sister, although our identities are special, we are willing to surround third brother's side. Qianling muttered to himself. At this point, Qianling closed his eyes and did not speak anymore. Seeing this, Xiaosheng did not speak again. Xiaochen was a person with great luck. Xiaosheng believed that Xiaosheng was a person with great luck. However, from Qianling's words just now, there seemed to be something that he did not say. Perhaps he knew something, but it was just not the time yet. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. This chapter ends. Chapter 833. Qianling did not say anything more, and Xiaosheng also closed his eyes to rest. Both of them sat cross-legged with their eyes closed and did not speak. However, Xiaosheng was still surprised by the people around Xiaochen. Each one was more abnormal than the other. They were either top special physiques or pure-blooded dragons. There was even a reincarnated almighty. Of course, the most abnormal one was Xiaochen. The heavenly sword embryo and the tempered battle body were both top items. Needless to say, the heavenly sword embryo was not even worth mentioning. Even the tempered battle body was something that Xiaosheng could not see through. This body tempering technique was indeed unfathomable. He did not know who created this body tempering technique and what level his cultivation had reached. Just as everyone began to close their eyes to cultivate, Xiaochen, who was in the heavenly fire, had already begun to temper his body according to the method of the tempered battle body. It was another pain that was worse than death. It was even more painful than when he first started cultivating the tempered battle body. After all, it was the heavenly fire. Tempering the body in the heavenly fire was already extremely painful. Furthermore, Xiaochen had to follow the method of the tempered battle body and take the initiative to draw the heavenly fire into his body to temper his internal organs. Xiaochen was asking for trouble. Taking the initiative to draw the heavenly fire into his body was definitely something that only a madman would do. To be honest, although the tempered battle body was terrifying, it was not something that anyone could cultivate. Even if the requirements were met, one must have great perseverance. Otherwise, even if it was given to you, you would not dare to cultivate it. He gritted his teeth and persevered. His face was flushed red. He felt as if his entire body was about to be roasted. His internal organs felt as if they were about to melt. Every time he broke through the tempered battle body, it could be said to be a painful transformation. If he could endure it, he would take another step forward. If he could not endure it, he could only die. He had seen the terror of the earth fire before. However, compared to the heavenly fire, the earth fire was clearly child's play. It was not worth mentioning at all. His entire body seemed to be burning from the inside out. Under such painful perseverance, Xiaochen operated the tempered battle body while secretly persevering. Xiaochen didn't know how much time had passed. Anyway, he didn't have any concept of time. His internal organs were constantly changing as the heavenly fire tempered him. Vaguely, Xiaochen's internal organs began to emit bursts of golden light. This golden light seemed to be invulnerable. Under the tempering of the heavenly fire, Xiaochen's internal organs were much, much stronger than before. Once his internal organs turned from gold to jade white, the tempered battle body would be considered to have successfully broken through to the second level of the jade organs realm. Xiaochen would then be immune to all poisons, and his physical strength would also improve by leaps and bounds. He was not sure how strong the second stage of the Jade Viscera realm was, but he was sure that it would not disappoint him. Under the scorching heat of the heavenly fire, Xiao Chen's internal organs turned from a golden color to a jade-white color. He was close to breaking through to the second tier of the jade internal organs realm. Xiao Chen didn't know how long he persevered. In any case, his entire body was already numb. He couldn't even cry out in pain. However, under such perseverance, the tempered battle body finally came to the point of breaking through. A terrifying blood qi rose from Xiao Chen's body. This was the sign of the tempered battle body breaking through. Compared to before, the blood qi in Xiao Chen's body had increased by at least 3 times. Even some half-saints would find it difficult to achieve such a terrifying blood qi. When the terrifying blood qi spread, Chen-Ling and Xiao-Sheng opened their eyes at the same time. Shock flashed through their eyes. What kind of body-refining cultivation method is third brother cultivating? How can it be so terrifying? Chen-Ling said in surprise. As the reincarnation of an almighty, Chen-Ling's vision was very high. Although he didn't know where Chen-Ling's hometown was, he could tell from the ninth heaven sword finger that he gave to Xiao Chen that Chen-Ling's hometown was definitely a continent of a higher level than the Tiana continent. Otherwise, it would be impossible to have a martial skill like the ninth heaven sword finger. However, even with such a high standard, at this moment, Chen-Ling was still shocked by Xiao Chen. What kind of body-refining technique could have such a terrifying power of qi and blood? Of course, Chen-Ling still didn't know that Xiao Chen's tempered battle body had only broken through to the second stage of the Jade Organs realm. There was still a long way to go before he could truly cultivate the tempered battle body. Otherwise, he would be even more shocked. Compared to Chen-Ling, Xiao-Sheng was much less surprised. After all, he knew how terrifying the tempered battle body that Xiao Chen cultivated was and was already prepared. But even so, when he truly felt the blood qi that erupted after the tempered battle body broke through to the second stage of the Jade Organs realm, Xiao-Sheng still secretly exclaimed. As expected of the number 1 body-refining cultivation method in the Tiana continent. It's just the second stage and it already has such a terrifying blood qi. I don't know what kind of transformation the body will have if it is completely cultivated. It was hard to imagine how powerful Xiao Chen's body would be if he could successfully cultivate the tempered battle body. Just as Xiao Sheng and Chen-Ling were secretly shocked, Xiao Chen, who was inside the heavenly fire, suddenly opened his eyes. A golden light flashed in his eyes. He had finally succeeded in breaking through. At this moment, Xiao Chen only felt that his body was filled with power. Compared to before, his current body could be described as terrifying. His body didn't change much, but his strength had increased by several times. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid qi, Xiao Chen said softly, "I've finally broken through." After successfully breaking through, Xiao Chen felt relieved. At the same time, his strength had taken a qualitative leap. Now, Xiao Chen didn't put those prospective holy sons in the Tiana continent in his eyes. Even if he didn't dare to say that he could defeat a holy son, he should have no problem protecting himself. After all, with his powerful body, unless it was a very fatal or serious injury, Xiao Chen's life would not be threatened. A powerful body represented a rich vitality. This was also why those body cultivators who mainly cultivated their bodies often had much stronger vitality than ordinary warriors. This was also the benefit of a powerful body. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid qi, Xiao Chen slowly got up. This trip to the Sun Saint sect was finally completed. Then, Xiao Chen stepped out of the heavenly fire. After breaking through the second stage of the Jade Organs realm, Xiao Chen clearly felt that the effect of the heavenly fire on him was minimal. There wasn't much meaning in continuing to stay here to cultivate. Therefore, Xiao Chen planned to return home and return to the ancient saint sect. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 834. After successfully breaking through to the second level of the Jade Organs realm, Xiao Chen slowly walked out of the heavenly fire. Seeing Xiao Chen again, Chen-Ling could clearly feel that there was a faint pressure unconsciously being emitted from Xiao Chen's body. This pressure did not come from his cultivation, but from Xiao Chen's physical body. Because he had just broken through, Xiao Chen could not control the power of his physical body very well. With a slight smile, Xiao Chen jumped down and landed in front of Chen-Ling and Xiao Sheng. He looked at Xiao Sheng and said with a smile, "Ancestor, how long did it take me to break through this time?" In the heavenly fire, Xiao Chen had no concept of time at all. The unbearable pain made Xiao Chen unable to care about anything else. Hearing this, Xiao Sheng smiled and said, "It's already been 2 months." He had actually stayed in the heavenly fire for 2 months. Hearing this, Xiao Chen was a little surprised. He felt that he had not been cultivating in the heavenly fire for that long. It took him 2 months to successfully break through to the second level of the Jade Organ's realm. After being stunned for a moment, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "It's been 2 months. It's about time. Let's return to the ancient saint sect." Preparing to return to the ancient saint sect, no one had any objections. Afterwards, they called Qin Shuru and Long Qing, and the group headed out of the 100,000 Flames territory. Of course, Xiao Sheng also returned to Xiao Chen's body. Before he was completely revived, it was better for Xiao Sheng not to expose himself. Compared to when they first came, there was one more person, and that was Chen-Ling. The group of 4 headed towards Heavenly Fire City. If they wanted to leave the Sun Saint sect, they could only go back the way they came and take the transportation array. However, just as Xiao Chen and the others were about to leave, the direct disciple of the Sun Saint sect was waiting at the gate of Heavenly Fire City with several other disciples. Everyone's faces were gloomy, especially the personal disciple in the lead. He had already waited here for more than 2 months, but he still hadn't seen Xiao Chen and the others appear. He still couldn't forget Long Qing's peerless beauty. At the same time, he wanted to take revenge, but Xiao Chen didn't appear. Damn it, it's already been 2 months. Could it be that this brat died in the 100,000 Flames domain? The direct disciple's face darkened as he viciously thought to himself. Yi Fuqian did not know what kind of deep hatred there was for this personal disciple to guard here for 2 whole months, just because Xiao Chen slapped him. It could be seen that this person was very narrow-minded. It could be said that he had completely lost his patience. Not only him, but the other core disciples of the Sun Saint sect were also like this. However, this personal disciple still didn't have the intention to give up. The anger in his heart couldn't be dispelled. Just as this personal disciple's face was extremely gloomy, suddenly, 4 young men and women slowly walked towards the city gate from afar. There were 2 men and 2 women. Seeing these 4 people, the personal disciple of the Sun Saint sect immediately became spirited. Weren't these people Xiao Chen and the others that he had been waiting for? The anger and resentment that he had accumulated over the past 2 months could finally be unleashed at this moment. It was as though he had picked up a treasure. This personal disciple immediately jumped 10 meters into the air. He excitedly turned his head to look at the person beside him and said, Quickly go back and inform Senior Brother Li Changle. Tell him that the brat has appeared. Ask him to quickly come to the city gates." Although he was angry, this personal disciple didn't foolishly rush up. He already knew that he was no match for Xiao Chen, so he could only rely on Senior Brother Li Changle. As the first candidate of the Sun Saint sect, he couldn't do it. Senior Brother Li Changle wouldn't be able to deal with this brat. After hearing this direct disciple's order, the disciple by the side immediately flew into the city and went to inform Senior Li Changle. Not long after this personal disciple left, Xiao Chen and the others also arrived at the city gate unhurriedly. Just as they were about to enter the city, that personal disciple directly led people to block the path of Xiao Chen and the others. Seeing this personal disciple, Xiao Chen's expression didn't change as he said indifferently, "It's you again? Like a ghost that won't go away." Although it had been 2 months, Xiao Chen still recognized this personal disciple. It was originally a very small matter that Xiao Chen didn't take to heart, but who would have thought that he would meet him here again? Moreover, looking at this personal disciple's appearance, it seemed that he had been waiting here for a long time. For such a trivial matter, this person could actually guard Skyflame City for 2 months. That was why Xiao Chen said that he was like a ghost that wouldn't go away. However, hearing Xiao Chen's words, this personal disciple's face darkened. "Humph, brat, you dare to attack the people of the Sun Saint sect. Do you think this matter will be settled just like that?" Obviously, he wouldn't let this matter go. In this regard, Xiao Chen only felt that it was a little troublesome, but since trouble had already come knocking on his door, there was nothing he could do. At most, he would just fight again. Anyway, this guy was asking for a beating, so he couldn't blame anyone. "Third brother, who is this guy?" Chen Ling didn't know this personal disciple. At this time, when he heard this, he also asked Xiao Chen curiously. "Nothing, just an idiot who was itching for a beating." Hearing Chen Ling's words, Xiao Chen said indifferently. He didn't put this personal disciple in his eyes at all. However, just as Xiao Chen finished speaking, Li Changle's figure appeared in Skyflame City. At the same time, there was a middle-aged man in ragged clothes beside Li Changle. This middle-aged man was none other than Xiao Chen's father, Xiao Qing. At this moment, Xiao Qing's appearance was much more miserable than before. Li Changle's eyes also flashed with anger. Previously, when he received the news from this personal disciple, Li Changle was originally punishing Xiao Qing. The reason was very simple. Xiao Qing didn't do what he had arranged. It could be said that he had beaten Xiao Qing up. After that, Li Changle directly brought Xiao Qing along. At the same time, he also punched and kicked Xiao Qing on the way and scolded him angrily. Now, they were already outside the city. In front of Xiao Chen and the others, Li Changle still slapped Xiao Qing's face and shouted angrily. "You're simply a piece of trash. You can't even do a small thing. What's the use of keeping you? Go and die." The more he scolded, the angrier he became. Then, Li Changle lifted his leg and kicked towards Xiao Qing. However, to everyone's surprise, Li Changle's kick didn't hit Xiao Qing. Instead, it was blocked by someone. Xiao Chen's figure appeared in front of Li Changle and blocked Li Changle's kick. At the same time, Xiao Chen's eyes were burning with anger. At the same time, a terrifying killing intent began to rise from Xiao Chen's body. When Li Changle appeared just now, Xiao Chen noticed him. After all, Li Changle was wearing the prospective Holy Sun's robe of the Sun Saint sect. However, when Xiao Chen shifted his gaze to the middle-aged man beside Li Changle, Xiao Chen immediately became angry. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 835. Xiao Chen's eyes flickered with rage. He hadn't given up on searching for Xiao Qing's whereabouts, but unfortunately, he hadn't obtained any information. Who would have thought that Xiao Qing would actually be in the Sun Saint sect? However, none of this was important. It didn't matter why Xiao Qing had appeared here or what Xiao Qing had done. Xiao Chen had seen Li Changle hit Xiao Qing with his own eyes. Just this point alone was enough to make Li Changle a dead man. Not only Xiao Chen, but Qin Shuru, Chen Ling, and Long Qing were also brimming with killing intent. What was laughable was that Li Changle still didn't know who Xiao Chen was. When Xiao Chen blocked his kick, Li Changle's expression was cold. "Who are you? Do you want to die?" In the Sun Saint sect, apart from a few people, no one dared to interfere in Li Changle's business. However, Xiao Chen ignored him and turned to look at Xiao Qing, who was also in a daze. "Father, I'm late." Xiao Qing also didn't expect to meet Xiao Chen here. It wasn't just Xiao Chen, Qin Shuru, Long Qing, and Chen Ling were also present. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, a line of clear tears flowed from Xiao Qing's eyes. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. Everything happened too suddenly. The father and son were speechless. At the same time, the direct disciple of the Sun Saint sect quickly walked over to Li Changle and said respectfully, "Senior brother, it's this kid." The direct disciple was already laughing in his heart. It wasn't easy to ask Li Changle for help, but now, Xiao Chen had taken the initiative to provoke Li Changle. How could Li Changle let him go? As if he could already see the scene of Xiao Chen being trampled by Li Changle, the direct disciple laughed in his heart. Hearing his words, a trace of killing intent flashed through Li Changle's eyes as he said indifferently, Looks like he's really a reckless fellow. From the beginning to the end, Li Chang'e didn't put Xiao Chen in his eyes. This was normal. After all, he was the first candidate of the Sun Saint sect. Except for those saints and saintesses, he didn't put anyone in his eyes. Even if Yuan Lin came, he wouldn't be afraid. At worst, no one could do anything to each other. It was impossible for Xiao Chen to be the Holy Sun, so Li Chang'e was not afraid. While Li Chang'e and Xiao Chen were talking, Xiao Chen had already handed Xiao Qing over to Qin Shuru. Then, he turned to look at Li Chang'e. The anger in his eyes had gradually subsided, but it was replaced by a strong murderous intent. Chen, forget it, forget it. Nobody knew a son better than his father. Xiao Qing naturally knew what Xiao Chen wanted to do. However, knowing Li Chang'e's combat strength and identity, Xiao Qing also planned to keep the peace, afraid that Xiao Chen would suffer some losses. However, after hearing Xiao Qing's words, Xiao Chen just said indifferently, "Father, don't worry. I'm here for everything." "That's right, old thing. Do you think you can forget it just because you say so?" "None of them will survive today," Li Chang'e, who was standing opposite of Xiao Chen, said coldly as Xiao Chen finished speaking. Li Chang'e also didn't intend to let Xiao Chen go. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen didn't hesitate and directly punched out. It seemed like an ordinary punch, but the power contained in it was enough to make people tremble in fear. After the tempered battle body broke through the second stage of the Jade Organ stage, Xiao Chen's physical strength was completely different from before. Facing Xiao Chen's punch, Li Chang'e wasn't a mediocre person. He immediately felt the terrifying power coming from Xiao Chen's fist. His face immediately changed and he couldn't help but cry out. He was very surprised that Xiao Chen had such terrifying strength, but Xiao Chen didn't talk nonsense and didn't give Li Chang'e a chance to speak. He directly punched out. Facing Xiao Chen's punch, Li Chang'e didn't dare to take it head-on. He dodged the punch in a flash. With a loud bang, Xiao Chen blasted a huge deep pit in the ground. Along with this punch, several Sacred Sun sect disciples present were stunned. How is this possible? Xiao Chen didn't use any martial skills or spiritual energy just now. He just relied on the strength of his physical body to have such power. The scene before them was completely beyond everyone's imagination. But in this regard, Xiao Chen didn't have any hesitation. He moved and attacked Li Chang'e again. The two fought fiercely. As the first candidate of the Sacred Sun sect, Li Chang'e was completely suppressed by Xiao Chen from the beginning. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't dare to face Xiao Chen head-on, he would have been defeated long ago. Looking at the battle before him, the Sacred Sun sect's direct disciple, who was previously overbearing, was completely dumbfounded and said in disbelief. How is this possible? Senior brother Li is suppressed. Li Chang'e wasn't Xiao Chen's opponent at all. Everyone could see this. Not only this direct disciple, but even Xiao Qing was also stunned. He naturally didn't expect his son to be so strong. Who is Li Chang'e? As the first candidate of the Sacred Sun sect, Xiao Qing was very clear about his combat strength. But such a genius was beaten like a dog in front of Xiao Chen. Thinking that Xiao Qing was still worried about Xiao Chen, Qin Shuru also comforted him. "Father, don't worry. My husband can destroy such an ant with a wave of his hand." Qin Shuru, Long Qing, and Chen Ling didn't doubt Xiao Chen's strength at all. A mere Li Chang'e was simply a piece of cake. There was no difficulty at all. It was precisely because they had absolute confidence in Xiao Chen that the three of them didn't intend to attack at all. They just protected Xiao Qing behind them to ensure his safety. The battle continued. Although Li Chang'e tried his best to dodge and escape, he was still injured by Xiao Chen in the end. After being injured by Xiao Chen, Li Chang'e's situation became even worse. His injuries became more and more serious after being hit by Xiao Chen. In less than 100 breaths, Li Chang'e had already felt the aura of death constantly shrouding him. From the way Xiao Chen attacked, this guy in front of him definitely wanted to kill him. Facing death, Li Chang'e was afraid. At the same time, he didn't expect Xiao Chen to be so strong. Li Chang'e wasn't a match for him in terms of combat strength and didn't want to die. Therefore, he could only try his best to resist while shouting coldly. "Who are you?" "I'm the first candidate of the Sacred Sun sect. If you dare to kill me, the Sacred Sun sect won't let you go." With such combat strength, Xiaochen definitely couldn't be a nobody. At the same time, Li Chang'e felt that his status was noble. With his identity as the first candidate of the Sacred Sun sect, how could Xiaochen dare to kill him? He was still fantasizing about using his identity to threaten Xiaochen. Unfortunately, not to mention that he was the first candidate of the Sacred Sun sect, even if the Sacred Sun sect came, Xiaochen would still kill him without hesitation. At worst, he would borrow Xiaoxing's strength again. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 836. He didn't care about Li Chang'e's threat at all. Bull*** T first chosen. Even if he was the son of ancient Saint Tianyang, he would still die today. In the face of Li Chang'e's threat, Xiaochen didn't care at all. At the same time, the killing intent on his body increased, and his attacks became more ruthless. Feeling that Xiaochen's attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer, Li Chang'e completely panicked and shouted angrily again, "I don't care who you are. If you dare to hurt me, the Sun Saint clan won't let you go." He was still threatening Li Chang'e, but just as he was shouting, Xiaochen successfully seized the opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. He punched out, and his fist was like a dragon emerging from the sea. It broke through all of Li Chang'e's defenses and hit Li Chang'e's chest hard. The sound of bones cracking rang out. In an instant, Li Chang'e's sternum was completely shattered, and his whole chest was completely caved in. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his whole body was directly blasted into the sky by the punch. He fell to the ground, and smoke and dust rose everywhere. Seeing this scene, the surrounding disciples of the Sun Saint clan were completely dumbfounded. No one dared to move. Everyone stared at the place where Li Chang'e fell. Slowly, the smoke and dust began to dissipate, and soon, Xiaochen and Li Chang'e's figures appeared in everyone's sight again. They saw Li Chang'e lying on the ground with a weak aura. Blood kept flowing out of the corners of his mouth and nostrils. Xiaochen's face was cold. He stepped on Li Chang'e's abdomen and looked at him indifferently. You can't kill me. I'm the first chosen of the Sun Saint clan." Li Chang'e said weakly as he was stepped on by Xiaochen. Hearing this, Xiaochen said indifferently, "Go to hell and tell that to the King of Hell." After saying that, without any hesitation, Xiaochen exerted force on his foot and crushed Li Chang'e's dantian. Li Chang'e spat out another mouthful of blood and struggled for a while. Then, his head tilted, and Li Chang'e stopped breathing. There was no hesitation at all. Seeing Li Chang'e being killed with his own eyes, the Sun Saint sect's direct disciple screamed, "Ah! You killed Senior Brother Li. How dare you kill Senior Brother Li?" Faced with Li Chang'e's death, this personal disciple was clearly scared silly. Hearing his miserable scream, Xiaochen turned his head to look. Although the killing intent in his eyes had faded a lot, it still did not dissipate. "You all deserve to die too." Since he had killed Li Chang'e, he might as well get rid of these ants as well. After saying that, Xiaochen once again perched on the ground. Seeing Xiaochen rushing toward them, the first reaction of the disciples of the Sun Saint clan was to run. What a joke! This was a ferocious person who could kill Li Chang'e. How could they possibly be a match for him? They could not summon any fighting spirit at all. The first thing they chose to do was to turn around and run. However, with the strength of these people, how could they escape from Xiaochen's hands? With the point of his finger, the sword light flashed and the Chun Jun sword finger was displayed, instantly piercing through the head of one of the disciples. After killing one person with a single finger, Xiaochen did not stop. He pointed several fingers in succession, and in a moment, all the Sun Saint sect's disciples were killed, leaving only the direct disciple. Seeing that he was the only one left, the direct disciple was completely stunned. He knelt in front of Xiaochen and kept crying and begging. However, Xiaochen just said indifferently, From the moment you came to Heavenly Flame City, the ending had already taken the initiative. After saying that, Xiaochen was ready to attack, but at the same time, a terrifying pressure came from Heavenly Flame City, and at the same time, a loud shout was heard. Stop! It was the expert of the Sun Saint Sect station in Heavenly Flame City who had arrived. However, Xiaochen completely ignored him and still pierced through the direct disciple's forehead with one finger, killing him directly. In the end, the direct disciple was also killed by Xiaochen. At the same time, a middle-aged man appeared in front of Xiaochen, his eyes burning with rage. This middle-aged man was a half-saint deacon of the Sun Saint Sect station in Heavenly Flame City, who was responsible for all the affairs of Heavenly Flame City. Previously, he had sensed the fluctuations of a battle outside the city and rushed here as soon as possible, but he was still a step too late. Looking around at the corpses of Li Changle and the other disciples, this half-saint deacon's heart trembled. Those disciples were not a big deal, but Li Changle was the first candidate chosen. Now that he had died here, how could the Sun Saint Sect let it go? Perhaps even he would be implicated. Thinking of this half-saint deacon looked at Xiaochen with a strong killing intent in his eyes. Now that things had come to this, he could only capture Xiaochen and hand him over to the Sun Saint Sect. The death of the first candidate chosen was definitely not a small matter. Who are you? How dare you kill the first candidate chosen of my Sun Saint Sect? You're courting death. He shouted coldly. Hearing this, Xiaochen did not change his expression at all. His face was still cold as he said, how could such trash become the first candidate chosen of the Sun Saint Sect? And the first candidate chosen? I killed him to clean up the mess for your Sun Saint Sect. Facing a half-saint expert, Xiaochen still did not show the slightest fear. Of course, this was also because Xiaochen had the ability to be fearless. Although the current Xiaochen was far from being a match for a half-saint expert, don't forget that Xiaosheng was a great weapon in his body. In the past few years, Xiaochen had been making progress, but Xiaosheng had not been idle. He had completely made up for this wisp of soul and transformed it into a complete saint soul. In this way, Xiaosheng could use more power. With the help of Xiaosheng's power, he might be able to compete with a half-saint expert. Seeing that Xiaochen was so fearless, this half-saint expert shouted angrily. You're courting death. Kneel down. The half-saint shouted angrily. At the same time, a terrifying pressure emanated from the half-saint expert and pressed toward Xiaochen. A semi-saint had already comprehended the power of laws. Under the pressure of such might, Xiaochen was naturally under great pressure. He wanted to use his pressure to force Xiaochen to kneel down. However, just as this half-saint expert attacked, an equally terrifying aura soared from Xiaochen's body and instantly broke through the half-saint expert's suppression. The aura that Xiaochen emitted also contained a faint power of laws. Upon sensing the emergence of this aura, this half-saint expert's expression sank. You? Who exactly are you? Only a holy son or a saintess could possess such a terrifying aura. Therefore, this half-saint expert couldn't make up his mind. A holy son or a saintess was an existence that he couldn't afford to offend. Besides, if Xiaochen was really a holy son or a saintess, his strength wouldn't be inferior to a half-saint expert like him. At the very least, it wouldn't be a problem for him to escape. Of course, this half-saint expert didn't know that this aura didn't actually come from Xiaochen. Instead, it came from Xiaosheng. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 837. Facing a half-saint expert, Xiaochen didn't try to be brave. Instead, he caught Xiaosheng's power. Feeling Xiaochen's terrifying power, the half-saint expert frowned and hesitated for a moment. This half-saint expert planned to capture Xiaochen directly and take him back to the Sun Saint Sect for the other saints to deal with. However, facing Xiaochen at this moment, he wasn't sure if he could successfully capture him. Of course, strength was one thing. Another thing was that he guessed Xiaochen's identity. Being able to have such a cultivation at such a young age, Xiaochen couldn't be an ordinary person. If Xiaochen had some great background, then this half-saint expert would have to take the blame if he rashly injured Xiaochen. These two reasons made this half-saint expert not dare to act rashly. Their eyes met. After a while, the half-saint expert took the initiative to restrain his aura and asked Xiaochen. "You killed the first candidate of the Sun Saint sect. You must come with me to the Sun Saint sect." He didn't intend to attack again, but he couldn't let Xiaochen go either. After all, Xiaochen had killed so many disciples of the Sun Saint sect, including Li Chang'e, the first candidate of the Sun Saint sect. If he let Xiaochen go, the Sun Saint sect would definitely punish him. Hearing this, Xiaochen also retracted his aura and said faintly, "Okay, I'll go with you to the Sun Saint sect." He wasn't afraid of going to the Sun Saint sect at all. With that, Xiaochen turned around and came to Xiaoqing and the others. He looked at Xiaoqing and said, "Father, come with me to the Sun Saint sect first. Then we'll go back." Xiaochen said this very calmly. Hearing this, Xiaoqing naturally had no objection and immediately nodded. Xiaochen was his son. Even if it was a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, Xiaoqing wouldn't shrink back at all. Seeing Xiaoqing nod, Xiaochen looked at Qin Shuru, Long Qing, and Chen Ling facing Xiaochen's gaze. The three of them also nodded. They weren't afraid of going to the Sun Saint sect either. After greeting everyone, Xiaochen entered Skyfire City under the personal guard of the half-saint expert. Together with him were the corpses of Li Chang'e and the others. Xiaochen was very calm about going to the Sun Saint sect. He wasn't afraid that the Sun Saint sect would dare to do anything to him. First of all, the three saint sects had formed an alliance. Moreover, it was Li Chang'e who sought his own death. In addition, Qin Shuru was the last disciple of Ice Lotus Prime Saint. As for Xiaochen, although he wasn't Randeng Koziai's disciple, Randeng Koziai wouldn't sit by and do nothing. Therefore, if the Sun Saint sect wanted to make things difficult for him, it would be equivalent to offending both the Heavenly Saint sect and the Ancient Saint sect. As long as Heavenly Saint sect wasn't dim-sighted, he wouldn't do such a stupid thing. Therefore, Xiaochen wasn't worried at all about the final result of the Sun Saint sect. There was a transmission formation that led directly to the Sun Saint sect from Skyfire City. Without any delay, the group arrived at the Sun Saint sect under the guidance of the half-saint expert. The half-saint expert must have sent back the news in advance. Therefore, when Xiaochen and the others arrived at the Sun Saint sect, a saint of the Sun Saint sect was already waiting for them. Perhaps it was because someone dared to kill the first prospective holy son of the Sun Saint sect. The saint didn't look good. At the same time, a faint killing intent constantly surrounded him. However, when he saw that it was Xiaochen and the others who came out of the transmission formation, the saint was stunned at first. Then he looked at the half-saint expert and asked, "Are they the ones who killed Li Chang'e?" "Yes," the half-saint expert answered truthfully. Hearing this, the saint was depressed. He recognized Xiaochen at a glance. Not only did he recognize Xiaochen, but he also recognized Qin Shuru. One of them was from the Ancient Saint sect, and the other was from the Heavenly Saint sect. Moreover, their identities weren't ordinary. To put it bluntly, they weren't inferior to the holy sons and holy daughters. If it was someone else who killed Li Chang'e, the saint would not hesitate to give the order to kill them. However, since it was Xiaochen and the others who killed Li Chang'e, the matter was troublesome. As a saint, he naturally knew a lot of secrets. He was very clear about the consequences if he killed Xiaochen and Qin Shuru. For a moment, he was in a dilemma. However, as a saint, he was also a shrewd person. He quickly came back to his senses and took the initiative to walk up to Xiaochen. "Xiaochen, why did you kill Li Chang'e?" Instead of directly attacking, he asked about the matter. Seeing this, the half-saint expert secretly rejoiced that he didn't choose to attack before. Seeing that the Lord Saint treated Xiaochen with respect, it was obvious that this young man's identity wasn't simple. If Xiaochen and the others didn't have an intimidating identity, the saint would have already attacked. However, now he actually asked about the matter with a pleasant expression. What did this prove? It proved that Xiaochen and the others weren't simple people. In the face of the saint's inquiry, Xiaochen truthfully told him what had happened. In the end, Xiaochen said indifferently, He deserved to die for insulting my father. Moreover, in my opinion, a person like Li Chang'e isn't worthy of being the prospective holy son of the Sun Saint sect. Leaving him alive would only bring shame to the Sun Saint sect. Until now, Xiaochen didn't regret killing Li Chang'e. At the same time, he bluntly said that Li Chang'e wasn't worthy of being the prospective holy son at all. Hearing this, the saint's face darkened slightly. Although he knew that there were some problems with Li Chang'e's character and that he wasn't very useful, Li Chang'e's talent and battle strength were real. He was able to become the first prospective holy son of the Sun Saint sect by relying on his own strength. Now that Xiaochen had insulted Li Chang'e, in the saint's opinion, it was almost equivalent to saying that there was no one left in the Sun Saint sect. This naturally made the saint unhappy. Therefore, after hearing Xiaochen's words, the saint's face darkened and he said angrily, "All right, I understand. All right, I already know what happened, but you can't leave the Sacred Sun sect for the time being. I still need to ask Master about this and wait for him to make a decision himself." After saying that, without waiting for Xiaochen to reply, the saint directly said to the half-saint experts at the side, "Take them away and treat them well." This was equivalent to directly putting Xiaochen and the others under house arrest. Hearing this, Xiaochen didn't resist and only said indifferently, "I believe that Prime Saint Tianyang can distinguish right from wrong." After saying that, he was led away by the half-saints of the Sun Saint sect. At the same time, the saint also disappeared in a flash. Obviously, he was going to report this matter to Prime Saint Tianyang. Just as Xiaochen thought, the Sun Saint sect didn't dare to casually attack them. However, on the way, Qin Shuru was still a little worried and asked, "Husband, do you want me to inform Master? Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me." Chapter 838. Hearing Qin Shuru ask if he should inform his master, Ancient Saint Ice Lotus, Xiaochen smiled and said, "Sure, but I believe that Ancient Saint Heavenly Sun should know how to deal with it. Moreover, don't think too highly of the prospective Holy Sun. After all, he is not a Holy Sun. Sun Sacred Sect has no reason to offend both the Heavenly Saint Sect and the Ancient Saint Sect for a prospective Holy Sun, let alone someone like Li Chang'e." Xiaochen didn't think that Ancient Saint Heavenly Sun would make a big fuss over someone like Li Chang'e. Perhaps Li Chang'e's talent was really good, but in Xiaochen's opinion, Li Chang'e had no chance of becoming a holy son in this lifetime because of his character alone. To become a holy son, one not only needed great talent, but also a broad mind and broad vision. If all holy sons were like Li Chang'e, then it would be really bad. At least, among the holy sons that Xiaochen had seen so far, none of them were narrow-minded, including the fourth holy son of Sun Sacred Sect, Jun Tong. Breadth of mind determined one's achievements, and breadth of vision determined one's height. This was what Xiaochen had always believed. If one wanted to become a true powerhouse, talent alone was far from enough. This was also why those who could become quasi-saints in history, regardless of whether they were good or bad, were certainly not narrow-minded people. They were taken to a small courtyard. The environment was good, but the surroundings were closely monitored. Moreover, Xiaochen and the others were not allowed to take half a step out of the courtyard. They were completely under house arrest. Xiaochen didn't show the slightest resistance and calmly stayed in the courtyard. At the same time, in the depths of Sun Sacred Sect, in the cave of Ancient Saint Heavenly Sun, the previous saint also truthfully told Ancient Saint Heavenly Sun what had happened. Just like Xiaochen, Ancient Saint Heavenly Sun didn't show the slightest anger after hearing the whole story. He just said indifferently, "I've already noticed Li Chang'e. I've been paying attention to this Li Chang'e for a long time. This child is not someone who can achieve great things. Even if he can temporarily become the first candidate, he will be defeated by others sooner or later. If he dies, then so be it." He wasn't angry about Li Chang'e's death at all. When he heard Prime Saint Tianyang's words, he stood aside respectfully. "But Master, no matter what, Li Chang'e is still the prospective holy son of our Sun Saint sect. He was killed just like that. Are we just going to let it go?" The saint's words were very obvious. Li Chang'e's death was nothing. this was also ancient Saint Tianyang's intention. However, this was related to the face of the Sun's sacred sect. If they let Xiao Chen and the others go, what would the world think of the Sun's sacred sect? For the sake of Sun Saint Sect's face, he naturally couldn't let Xiao Chen go so easily. Hearing this, Prime Saint Tianyang smiled faintly and said, "How about this? Tell the Heavenly Saint Sect and Ancient Saint Sect to send people to pick them up. This way, the world won't say anything." They couldn't let Xiao Chen and the others go, but they could ask the Heavenly Saint Sect and Ancient Saint Sect to send people to pick them up. Moreover, the people sent had to be at least saints. This way, in the eyes of outsiders, it was equivalent to the Heavenly Saint Sect and Ancient Saint Sect giving an explanation, and the Sun's sacred sect's face could be saved. Hearing this, the saint also felt that this method was the best and respectfully nodded. Yes. Sure enough, Prime Saint Tianyang didn't make a big fuss. Soon, the saint also conveyed this decision to Xiao Chen and the others. Hearing this, Qin Shuru looked at Xiao Chen with a puzzled expression. Because when he asked Xiao Chen if he should inform Prime Saint Bing Lian, Xiao Chen said that he could. Now, the Sun's sacred sect actually gave such an answer. Everything seemed to be within Xiao Chen's expectations. Facing Qin Shuru's puzzlement, after the saint left, Xiao Chen said with a smile, "It's not strange. It's not strange. Think about it, it's not a secret that I killed Li Chang'e, but many people outside the Skyfire City saw it, so this matter naturally can't be hidden. Since it can't be hidden and Sun Saint Sect has no intention of pursuing it, they naturally need a way out. These big sects all value face more than anything else." He had already guessed that the Sun Sacred Sect would ask the Heavenly Saint Sect and Ancient Saint Sect to send people to pick them up, so when Qin Shuru asked if he should inform Prime Saint Bing Lian, Xiao Chen didn't refuse. Not only Qin Shuru, but even Xiao Chen had already sent a message back to the Ancient Saint Sect. Presumably, the Ancient Saint Sect had already taken action. "Well, let's stay in the Sun Sacred Sect for 2 days. Don't worry," he said to Qin Shuru with a smile. He wasn't worried about what would happen next, and the Sun Sacred Sect indeed didn't make things difficult for Xiao Chen and the others. Except for forbidding them to leave the small courtyard, everything else was very good. Even the injuries on Xiao Qing's body were specially prepared by the Sun Sacred Sect for him to take. Xiao Chen hadn't seen Xiao Qing for a long time. In the next few days, it was rare for him to be by Xiao Qing's side. And from Xiao Qing's mouth, Xiao Chen also knew why he became Li Chang'e's slave. Originally, Xiao Qing was directly sent to the Sun Sacred Sect and then cultivated in the Sun Sacred Sect. Once, he heard that the 100,000 fire domain of the Sun Sacred Sect was a good place to gain experience, so Xiao Qing came to Heavenly Flame City. But unexpectedly, Xiao Qing was intercepted by a group of roving bandits outside Heavenly Flame City. Fortunately, he was saved by Li Chang'e, who happened to pass by. He originally thought that Li Chang'e was his savior, but who would have thought that this Li Chang'e wasn't a good person at all? His ancestral home was in Heavenly Flame City, so he had his own family business in Heavenly Flame City. After saving Xiao Qing, Li Chang'e arranged for Xiao Qing to be a servant in Heavenly Flame City. Although he was called a servant, he was actually a slave. As long as Xiao Qing didn't do a good job, Li Chang'e would punch and kick him. Just like that, Xiao Qing stayed in Heavenly Flame City for 4 years. After knowing Xiao Qing's experience in these years, Xiao Chen also told Xiao Qing about the situation of his mother, Bai Ruyue. Hearing that Bai Ruyue had been arranged by Xiao Chen to stay in the Wuyue Empire of the ancient sacred state and wasn't in any danger, Xiao Qing was relieved. The days in the Sun Sacred Sect were very peaceful. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Xiao Chen could also accompany his father. 2 days passed in a row. On this day, someone suddenly came to visit. The people who came were Yan Xiong and Zhao Afeng, who were acquaintances of Xiao Chen. These 2 people could be considered old acquaintances of Xiao Chen. He didn't know where they heard the news that he was in the Sun Sacred Sect, but the 2 of them came together. After taking a seat in the main hall, Xiao Chen took the initiative to cup his hands to Yan Xiong and said, "Senior brother Yan Xiong, brother Zhao, why are you here?" "Ha, We heard that junior brother Xiao is a guest in the Sun Sacred sect, so we naturally came. No matter what, we have to be a good host." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yin Xiong laughed loudly. Hearing this, Xiao Chen also smiled and replied, "Senior brother Yin Xiong must be joking. I'm not here as a guest, I'm under house arrest. Please collect, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 839. Yin Xiong and Zhao Hufeng took the initiative to visit. Hearing Xiao Chen's self-deprecating words, Yin Xiong waved his hand indifferently. "Junior brother Xiao, you don't need to care. In my opinion, Li Changle is just a piece of trash. He relied on his talent to become the first candidate, but it won't last long. Even if you don't kill him this time, he will soon be trampled by the other candidates. Even Zhao Hufeng is preparing to challenge Li Changle. If it weren't for the fact that he's not in the sect, the position of the first candidate would have already been taken by someone else." Yin Xiong clearly knew that Xiao Chen had killed Li Changle, but he didn't care about it at all. He didn't feel the slightest bit of regret for Li Changle's death. Xiao Chen even felt contempt from Yin Xiong's words. Yin Xiong was very straightforward and said what he thought. He didn't like Li Changle to begin with, so he didn't mince his words at all. Zhao Hufeng could only smile bitterly at Yin Xiong's words. Yin Xiong really didn't know what to say. After all, Li Changle was the candidate of the Sun Saint sect and was Yin Xiong's senior brother. But from Yin Xiong's words, it was as if Li Changle's death wasn't worth regretting. Even Xiao Chen didn't know how to respond to Yin Xiong's words. Yin Xiong wasn't stupid. He laughed and took the initiative to change the topic. Let's not talk about these annoying things. Junior brother Xiao, I've come to drink with you today. I'll let you taste the special wine of our Sun Saint sect." "That's great. Senior brother, please," Xiao Chen replied with a smile and personally led Yin Xiong to the backyard. They sat down in the backyard. Xiao Qing, Chen Ling, Long Qing, Qin Shuru and the others were also present. They were the closest people to Xiao Chen. After introducing themselves, Yin Xiong straightforwardly took out the good wine he had collected for many years. There were actually 20 jars. These were the best wines in the Sun Saint sect. Without saying anything, everyone poured the wine and quickly drank. While Xiao Chen was drinking happily, on the other side, in the cave residence where Juntong lived, several disciples of the Sun Saint clan were standing respectfully in front of Juntong, crying and complaining about something. "Holy Sun, you have to uphold justice for senior brother Li. That Xiao Chen is currently in the sect." "That's right, Holy Sun. Senior brother Li is from the 4th Sacred Palace. Now that he's been killed, are we just going to swallow this humiliation?" These disciples were obviously begging Juntong to avenge Li Changle. Of course, these people were also Li Changle's henchmen. However, in the face of their cries, Juntong impatiently waved her hand and said, "Don't worry. His skills are not as good as his opponents. Even if he died, he would have died for nothing. Moreover, this Li Changle insulted his parents. If it were me, I would have killed him too. This matter ends here. Just listen to the arrangements of the sect. Don't mention this again." Juntong had no intention of avenging Li Changle at all. Hearing this, the disciples were stunned. Then, one of them said unwillingly, "Could it be that senior brother Li died in vain just like that?" Holy Sun, no matter how senior brother Li, however, before the disciple could finish, Juntong lightly snorted and said, "What? Didn't you hear what I said?" "Yes, we understand." Seeing that Juntong was a little angry, the disciples immediately bowed respectfully and didn't dare to say anything else. How could Juntong not know what these disciples were thinking when they bowed? They were Li Changle's henchmen, and they had done a lot of sneaky things behind Li Changle's back. Now, they wanted Juntong to make trouble for Xiao Chen out of selfishness. In Juntong's eyes, these guys were simply disgusting. How could the 4th Sacred Palace have such disciples? Waving her hand, she impatiently dismissed them. Seeing this, they retreated cautiously. But just as they were about to leave the hall, Juntong seemed to have thought of something and said indifferently, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking, but I'm telling you in advance, don't go looking for trouble with Xiaochen, and don't make a fuss about it. If I find out who's behind this, you know the consequences. Hearing this, the disciples respectfully responded again and then left the hall. Looking at them leaving, Juntong's face still had a touch of anger. To be honest, Juntong didn't like Li Changle's character. But who asked Li Changle to be a member of the Fourth Sacred Palace? Therefore, Juntong had told Li Changle more than once not to spend all his time scheming. Since he was a candidate, he had to show the magnanimity of a candidate. How could a person like him be worthy of being the candidate of the Fourth Sacred Palace if he spent all his time thinking about how to harm others? But unfortunately, Li Changle didn't listen at all. Now, he was killed by Xiaochen. To put it bluntly, even Juntong, the candidate who had the closest relationship with Li Changle, felt that Li Changle deserved to die. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, Juntong didn't think of finding trouble with Xiaochen, let alone revenge. Unaware of what happened on Juntong's side, Juntong looked at Xiaochen again. Under the company of good wine, everyone quickly became familiar with each other. At this time, the most outspoken Yan Xiong didn't look like a candidate at all. He intimately hugged Xiaochen's shoulder and said with a smile, "Ha, little junior brother, you really have good luck with women. You actually managed to find such a beautiful wife. Also, your second sister is like a fairy that has descended to the mortal world. Ha, I'm really envious." Yan Xiong kept praising Qin Shuru and Long Qing for their beauty. Of course, Yan Xiong's praise didn't have the slightest intention. It was just a simple compliment. He simply felt that the two girls were beautiful, nothing more. Therefore, after hearing Yan Xiong's words, Xiaochen didn't feel disgusted. Even Qin Shuru and Long Qing didn't say anything. Instead, it was Xiao Hufeng who kept trying to smooth things over. Looking at his expression, he seemed a little embarrassed. Finally, Yan Xiong changed the topic. Xiao Hufeng looked at Xiaochen and said, "Brother Xiao, it has been more than 4 years since we parted in the 100 Spirits realm, right?" "Yes, it has indeed been more than 4 years." Hearing this, Xiaochen nodded and replied, "Back then, we were still teammates who fought side by side. I heard that the ancient sage sect also opened the heritage inheritance. Brother Xiao should have also participated, right?" Xiao Hufeng said, "Yes, I did." "Brother Xiao, didn't you do the same?" The two recalled what happened in the 100 Spirits realm. Now that they thought about it, it was as if it had happened yesterday. But in the blink of an eye, 4 years had passed. And in these 4 years, Xiaochen and Xiao Hufeng had both changed a lot. Compared with 4 years ago, they were completely different. They had both received the heritage inheritance of their respective sage sects, and their cultivation and strength had far surpassed that of the past. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 840. Xiaochen and Xiao Hufeng sighed when they talked about what happened at the 100 Spirits Lake. However, Yan Xiong, who was beside them, said fiercely, "Mother asterisk cur, if the frost python and Yun Wan hadn't tricked me, I wouldn't have been defeated." Xiaochen and Xiao Hufeng smiled helplessly when they heard Yan Xiong. Yan Xiong still hadn't forgotten. However, if Yan Xiong hadn't been impulsive, he wouldn't have fallen for the frost python's trap. Xiao Hufeng laughed loudly. Then, he looked at Xiaochen and said, "Brother Xiao, it's rare to see you. How about we spar?" Xiao Hufeng was excited to see Xiaochen since they had both experienced the inheritance and fought before. He wanted to spar with Xiaochen again. Xiaochen didn't reject Xiao Hufeng's request. Although Xiao Hufeng was no longer his opponent and couldn't even last one round against Xiaochen, Xiaochen had no reason to reject Xiao Hufeng's request. Yan Xiong nodded slightly. Then, the two of them came to the center of the courtyard. Looking at the two of them standing opposite each other, Yan Xiong smiled faintly. Xiao Hufeng did not see through Xiaochen's cultivation, but how could Yan Xiong not see through it? At first glance, Yan Xiong found that Xiaochen's cultivation had broken through the Tao Master realm, while Zhao Hufeng's cultivation was only at the completion of the Tao King realm. Zhao Hufeng had no chance of winning at all. To be honest, Yin Xiong was also surprised by Xiao Chen's cultivation. He didn't know how Xiao Chen cultivated to be so fast. Of course, Yin Xiong didn't know that the breakthrough in cultivation was only one aspect. Xiao Chen's battle strength had changed the most in the past few years. "Brother Xiao, I'm coming. Be careful." Xiao Hufeng took the initiative to attack and said. Then, he threw out a punch. In the face of Zhao Hufeng's attack, Xiao Chen did not choose to dodge. Instead, he charged forward and the two immediately engaged in a fierce battle. Yin Xiong, Chen Ling, Long Qing, Qin Shuru, and Xiao Qin could tell that Xiao Chen was deliberately going easy on Zhao Hufeng. Even during the battle, Xiao Chen kept feeding Zhao Hufeng moves. The sparring between the two did not seem like a battle at all. It was more like a teacher teaching his student. It was precisely because Xiao Chen had deliberately gone easy on Zhao Hufeng that not only had he not been instantly killed, but he had also gained a lot from the battle with Xiao Chen. After a quarter of an hour, Zhao Hufeng took the initiative to retreat. Seeing this, Xiao Chen did not chase after him and separated again. Zhao Hufeng's expression had completely changed at this time. There was some bitterness, but more than that, there was gratitude. As the person involved, how could Zhao Hufeng not feel that Xiao Chen had been going easy on him in the previous battle? Taking a deep breath, Zhao Hufeng cupped his hands and said, "It seems that Brother Xiao has not wasted these 4 years. You have already left me far behind. However, I still have to thank Brother Xiao." He cupped his hands and thanked Zhao Hufeng. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled and replied, "Brother Xiao is too polite. I just had some opportunities of my own. Brother Zhao has also improved a lot. In terms of strength, you are already above Li Chang'e." Zhao Hufeng was the third candidate chosen saint of the Sun Saint sect, while Li Chang'e was the first candidate chosen saint. However, after the battle just now, Xiao Chen was certain that Zhao Hufeng's strength definitely surpassed Li Chang'e's. It seemed that Yin Xiong was not lying. Fortunately, Li Changfeng was not in the sect. Otherwise, the position of the first candidate chosen saint would have changed hands long ago. However, was it really a coincidence that Li Changfeng ran to Skyfire City? Was it not because he wanted to protect his position as the first candidate chosen saint that he deliberately hid there? Xiao Chen did not know whether Li Chang'e intended to seize Skyfire City, but it did not matter because he was already dead. After the battle, everyone drank until late at night. Only then did Yin Xiong and Zhao Hufeng leave. On the second day of drinking, early in the morning when many disciples of the Sun Saint sect had just woken up from their cultivation, 2 terrifying auras pressed down from the sky. The appearance of these 2 auras instantly made everyone in the Sun Saint sect nervous, including the saints of the Sun Saint sect. In less than 3 breaths, a total of 8 saints had appeared in the sky above the Sun Saint sect. At the same time, 2 cracks appeared in the space in front of the 8 saints as if it had been forcibly torn apart. From the cracks, an even more terrifying aura spread out. Then, 2 figures slowly walked out of the cracks. With such terrifying auras, these 2 people were clearly not ordinary people. As the 2 people appeared, a man and a woman, the saints of the Sun Saint sect all cupped their hands and bowed. "Greetings to Prime Saint Ice Lotus and Randeng Kozii." They were none other than the patriarchs of the Sky Saint sect and the Ancient Saint sect, Prime Saint Ice Lotus and Randeng Kozii. Just as the saints of the Sun Saint sect finished speaking, Prime Saint Tianyang's figure also appeared in the sky. Seeing Prime Saint Tianyang appear, Randeng Kozii said with a chuckle, "Ah, this old man came here specifically for Xiao Chen. Tianyang, I will definitely give your Sun Saint sect an explanation for this matter." "Me too," Prime Saint Ice Lotus chimed in when she heard Prime Saint Ronding's words. As soon as the 2 patriarchs appeared, they bluntly stated their purpose. They came for Xiao Chen and Qin Shuru, and at the same time, they wanted to give the Sun Saint sect an explanation. Hearing this, many disciples of the Sun Saint sect secretly breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, their faces also became proud, and the anger in their hearts completely dissipated. Originally, many disciples thought that Li Changle's death was in vain. However, no matter what, Li Changle was still the prospective saint of the Sun Saint sect. As fellow disciples of the Sun Saint sect, the disciples of the Sun Saint sect definitely felt a little uncomfortable that he was killed just like that. It wasn't because of Li Changle, but because of the pride of being a disciple of the Sun Saint sect. But now, for this matter, the two patriarchs of the Sky Saint sect and the Ancient Saint sect had personally appeared. This was enough to give the Sun Saint sect face. Not only the disciples, but the saints also felt the same. If the two patriarchs personally came to the Sun Saint sect to apologize, not only would it save the Sun Saint sect's face, but it would also become a beautiful story. When he heard Randang Kozai and Prime Saint Ice Lotus's words, Prime Saint Tianyang also laughed heartily. Haha, you two old fellows, there's no need for the two of you to personally appear for the matters of the younger generation. It's just a small matter. Haha, but since you're here, let's have a few drinks today. Prime Saint Tianyang didn't conceal his words. His voice was so loud that everyone in the Sun Saint sect heard him. As he spoke, the three patriarchs disappeared into the horizon together, followed by the disciples and saints. At the same time, Li Changle's matter was completely resolved. Just as the Heavenly Sun Saint had said, since the two patriarchs had appeared, Li Changle's death was just a small matter that wasn't worth mentioning at all. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 841. With the arrival of Randang Kozai and the Ice Lotus Prime Saint, Xiaochen and the others naturally wouldn't have any problems. Sure enough, after the three ancestors left, a saint from the Sun Saint sect arrived at the residence of Xiaochen and the others. His attitude was clearly much friendlier. Xiaochen, Randang Kozai and the Ice Lotus Prime Saint asked me to pass on a message to you. They want you to return to the Ancient Saint Province. They could leave at any time. Hearing the saint's words, Xiaochen bowed and thanked him. Thank you, Senior. Randang Kozai had asked them to leave first. Clearly, the three old fellows still had something to discuss. Xiaochen also guessed that he was just an excuse for Randang Kozai and the Ice Lotus Prime Saint to personally come to the Sun Saint sect. The three of them definitely had something to discuss. Since that was the case, Xiaochen naturally didn't need to wait in the Sun Saint sect. Moreover, Xiaochen wanted to take this opportunity to return to the Moonless Empire. Since he had already found his father, Xiao Qing, he naturally wanted to reunite with them. Moreover, only by letting Xiao Qing go to the Moonless Empire would Xiaochen be at ease. After bidding farewell to Yan Xiong and Zhao Hafeng, Xiaochen sent a message to Randang Kozai, telling him that he would return to the Moonless Empire first before returning to the Ancient Saint sect. Randang Kozai naturally had no objections to Xiaochen's decision. On the same day, Xiaochen and the others left the Sun Saint sect and returned to West Sea City through the transportation array. After several months, West Sea City had once again regained its peace. The legendary dragon race had also gradually been forgotten by the people. After all, ever since the last demonic beast attack, the legendary dragon race had never appeared again. Of course, it was impossible for it to appear again because Long Qing was by Xiaochen's side at this moment. Without deliberately paying attention to this matter, Xiaochen was naturally happy to be free. He smoothly took the transportation array in West Sea City and left the Sun Saint Province. After returning to the Ancient Saint sect, Xiaochen didn't stop. He brought Little Qing, Long Qing, Qin Shuru, Chen Ling, and the others to the Moonless Empire. With the transportation array, it didn't take long for the group to arrive at the capital of the Moonless Empire. The Moonless Empire was the first place Xiaochen came into contact with after coming to the Tiana continent. Looking at everything familiar in the imperial capital, Xiaochen smiled slightly. Father, let's go see my mother. After not coming back for so many years, Xiaochen also missed his mother, Bairu Yue. Hearing this, Xiao Qing felt the same. Emperor was the crown prince of the crown prince of the crown SSSS heavenly residence, TSSSS. The former crown prince, Chu Wuming, was now the emperor of the Moonless Empire. The moment Xiaochen appeared in the capital, Chu Wuming received the news. Hearing that Xiaochen had returned to the Moonless Empire, Chu Wuming, who was in the imperial palace, immediately issued a decree. Pass down the decree. Prepare for the heavenly residence. For Chu Wuming to be able to sit on the throne and develop the Moonless Empire into the largest empire in the entire Danyang County, Xiaochen's help was absolutely huge. Moreover, although Chu Wuming had never left Danyang County, he had been paying attention to Xiaochen. He knew that Xiaochen was now the first candidate holy son of the ancient sacred sect. As such, Chu Wuming was even more afraid of Xiaochen than before. At the same time, he also understood that if the Moonless Empire wanted to continue to prosper, it was necessary to have a good relationship with Xiaochen. The status of the candidate holy son of the ancient sacred sect was much higher than Chu Wuming's status as the emperor of the Moonless Empire. To put it bluntly, Xiaochen only needed to say a word to determine whether the Moonless Empire would prosper or decline. It was also because of Xiaochen's deterrence that no one in Danyang County dared to provoke the Moonless Empire, including the Heavenly Qi sect. Even though Gu Qi had left the Heavenly Qi sect, the Heavenly Qi sect was still intact and no one dared to provoke them. The reason for this was naturally because of Xiaochen's existence. Perhaps even Xiaochen himself did not expect that because of his existence, the Moonless Empire and the Heavenly Qi sect would become the true overlords of Danyang County. Chu Wuming immediately rushed to the Heavenly Stellar Residence. At the same time, Xiaochen had already brought everyone to the Heavenly Stellar Residence in the imperial capital. There were still some warriors from the Heavenly Stellar continent who had held back. However, they were all old, weak, sick, and disabled. They could be considered as people who had retired here. When they saw Xiaochen, Qin Shuru, Long Qing, Chen Ling, and the others appear, the warriors from the Heavenly Stellar continent were all extremely excited. They respectfully welcomed Xiaochen and the others into the courtyard. "Is Mother well?" Xiaochen asked as he walked towards the backyard. Faced with Xiaochen's question, the warrior from the Heavenly Stellar continent respectfully replied, in reply to King Bewitching Sword, "Madam Xiao as well." "That's good. By the way, is there any news of the Burning Sky Ruler?" Xiaochen asked again. When he had left the Moonless Empire for the Heavenly Qi sect, the Burning Sky Ruler had also left. However, when he heard Xiaochen's question, the warrior from the Heavenly Stellar continent shook his head, indicating that there was no news yet. There was still no news of the Burning Sky Ruler. Xiaochen did not frown at this. After so many years, where had the Burning Sky Ruler gone? However, just as Xiaochen was pondering, the group arrived outside Bai Ruya's courtyard. They pushed the door open and saw Bai Ruya sitting in the middle of the courtyard. Xiaochen quickly went up to greet her. "Mother." Hearing Xiaochen's voice, Bai Ruya, who was originally in a daze, was stunned. However, she quickly recovered and a happy smile appeared on her face as she hugged Xiaochen. Xiaochen had left for so many years and Bai Ruya naturally missed him dearly. Now that Xiaochen had returned, how could she not be happy? "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back," Bai Ruya said gently as she hugged Xiaochen. "Mother, I'm not the only one who came back this time. Look who else came back." Xiaochen replied with a smile when he heard Bai Ruya's words. "Not the only one who came back." Hearing this, Bai Ruya reluctantly released Xiaochen and looked towards the entrance of the courtyard. She saw Long Qing, Chen Ling, Qin Shuru and Xiaoqing standing there. Her gaze swept across the four of them. When she saw Xiaoqing, Bai Ruya was dumbfounded. She did not expect Xiaochen to find Xiaoqing. The husband and wife looked at each other. Ignoring the surrounding people, Xiaoqing domineeringly hugged Bai Ruya and fiercely kissed her. Bai Ruya's face turned red from Xiaoqing's sudden sneak attack. She unhappily said, "What are you doing? Chinner and the others are still here." "Ah, what are you afraid of? We've been married for so long. Moreover, Chinner is not a child." Xiaoqing did not mind Bai Ruya's dissatisfaction and laughed loudly. From the looks of it, he was in a very good mood. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 842. Shao Qing was overjoyed to finally be reunited with Bai Ruiyue. In fact, Shao Qing and Bai Ruiyue didn't have much ambition in their hearts. They didn't want to become experts that could intimidate a region. What both of them wanted the most was to live a peaceful life. If they had to make a wish, both of them only wished to live a little longer so that they could accompany Shao Qing for a little longer. It was a very simple wish, so Shao Qing was already very satisfied after seeing Bai Ruiyue. Not only did Shao Qing return, even Shao Qing was brought back by Shao Qing. Today was naturally a good day. Bai Ruiyue immediately ordered people to prepare wine and dishes so that everyone could have a good meal together. Just as everyone was happily chatting, a cultivator from the heavenly Qin continent hurried into the courtyard and came to Shao Qing's side. He whispered in his ear, "King Bewitching Sword, His Majesty is here." The His Majesty that he was talking about was naturally Chu Wuming. Hearing this, Shao Qing smiled and nodded. He then looked at Shao Qing and Bai Ruiyue and said, "Father, Mother, Chu Wuming is here. I'll go out and meet him." "Okay, go. Don't forget to come back quickly." Hearing Shao Qing's words, Bai Ruiyue nodded in agreement. However, she didn't forget to remind Shao Qing to come back quickly. It was rare for the family to be reunited, so they naturally had to have a reunion dinner together. Nodding in agreement, Shao Qing then looked at Qianling and the other two and said, "Big brother, come with me. Shui Rou, you and second sister can accompany father and mother." After letting the two girls accompany Shao Qing and Bai Ruiyue, Shao Qing quickly left the courtyard with Qianling and Shui Rou. They walked all the way to the main hall of the heavenly Qin residence. Here, Shao Qing saw Chu Wuming. Compared to before, Chu Wuming was much more dignified now. After all, he was the ruler of a country and held the power to kill. However, Chu Wuming's prestige was useless against Shao Qing. How could Shao Qing care about the emperor of a small country? Seeing Shao Qing and Qianling walk over, Chu Wuming was very smart. He did not put on the airs of an emperor and took the initiative to greet them. He bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, candidate saint." With the passage of time, both Shao Qing and Chu Wuming's identities had undergone tremendous changes. Therefore, Chu Wuming no longer dared to speak to Shao Qing like before. On the contrary, he became respectful. Facing Chu Wuming's actions, Shao Qing personally helped him up and said with a smile, "Brother Chu, let's go back to the way it was before. I like it better." Shao Qing and Chu Wuming could be considered friends. Moreover, over the years, Chu Wuming had indeed fulfilled his promise. Not only did he support the development of the heavenly Qin residence, he also treated the warriors of the heavenly Qin continent well. Especially Bai Ruiyue, he was very meticulous. Chu Wuming even conferred Bai Ruiyue the title of Empress Dowager, which was equivalent to Chu Wuming's birth mother. Of course, this was all to curry favor with Shao Qing. However, it was undeniable that Chu Wuming had put in a lot of effort. This was something that Shao Qing was very satisfied with. At least in the Moonless Empire and the entire Danyang County, the warriors of the heavenly Qin continent did not need to worry about their safety. Hearing Shao Qing's words, Chu Wuming was stunned at first, but then he was overjoyed. However, on the surface, he still looked very nervous as he said, "Then brother Shao, I will respectfully accept." "Ha, you brat. Alright, do we still need to talk about this? How it was before, how it is now?" "Oh right, this is my big brother, Qianling. This is the emperor of the Moonless Empire, Chu Wuming." Naturally, he could tell what Chu Wuming was thinking in his heart. It was nothing more than wanting to hug his thigh tightly. However, Shao Qing did not object to this. He did not even mind helping Chu Wuming. After all, the development of the Moonless Empire was a good thing for the warriors of the heavenly Qin continent. Even though Shao Qing did not need to rely on the Moonless Empire now, this did not hinder anything. After personally introducing the two of them, Chu Wuming also respectfully called Qianling big brother. However, Qianling only nodded slightly in response, appearing very indifferent. It could not be helped. the people around Xiao Chen were really arrogant. Qin Shuru and Long Qing were like this, and Chen Ling was even more so. To put it bluntly, in Chen Ling's eyes, even an ancestor like Randeng Kozai was probably not worthy of his attention. However, in the face of Chen Ling's indifference, Chu Wuming did not dare to have the slightest dissatisfaction. Immediately, the three of them walked into the hall together. Xiao Chen sat on the main seat, while Chen Ling and Chu Wuming sat on the left and right of Xiao Chen respectively. Actually, Chu Wuming did not come here for anything special. It was nothing more than chatting casually. After chatting for a while, Xiao Chen still urged Chu Wuming to go back quickly. Therefore, Chu Wuming did not stay for long and politely sent him off. However, before he left, Xiao Chen still told Chu Wuming that when he left, he would go to the palace to find him. At that time, the two of them would drink until they were drunk. Regarding this, Chu Wuming naturally agreed. How could Chu Wuming refuse to drink until they were drunk together with Xiao Chen? After the two of them agreed, Chu Wuming left, and Xiao Chen brought Chen Ling back to the backyard. However, on the way back, Chen Ling said with some confusion, "Third brother, why do you have to be so courteous to such an ant-like person?" Chen Ling obviously looked down on Chu Wuming. In Chen Ling's eyes, the emperor of a small empire was no different from an ant. However, Xiao Chen replied with a smile. "Big brother, you don't know. This brother Chu has helped me a lot in the past. Furthermore, he has taken care of mother all these years. One cannot forget one's roots, and even more so, cannot burn the bridge after crossing the river. Since brother Chu has never let me down, I naturally cannot let him down. No matter what my status is in the future, he will always be my friend." Chen Ling did not know the relationship between Xiao Chen and Chu Wuming. Hearing this, he did not say anything else. After Xiao Chen and Chen Ling returned to the backyard, a sumptuous banquet had already been prepared. Everyone took their seats and began to happily eat and drink. It could be said that this was Xiao Chen's family's day of reunion. Not only had Xiao Qing and Qin Shuru returned, even Chen Ling and Long Qing were present. During the banquet, Bai Ruyue had a blissful smile on her face. In fact, back in the heavenly Qin continent, Long Qing and Chen Ling had already acknowledged Xiao Chen and Bai Ruyue as their adoptive parents. After all, they were sworn siblings with Xiao Chen. As such, Xiao Chen's parents were naturally their parents. Therefore, Long Qing and Chen Ling had always called Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue father and mother. Of course, the two elders also doted on the two of them. In front of Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue, Long Qing and Chen Ling put away the arrogance in their hearts. It was as if they truly treated them as their biological parents. With 3 children and their daughter-in-law reunited, the courtyard was filled with happiness. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 843. This meal was very enjoyable. The only thing that made Xiao Chen feel helpless was that Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue wanted to have grandchildren. Xiao Qing, whose face was a little red, looked at Xiao Chen and scolded him with a dissatisfied look. He didn't know if it was because he drank too much or something else. You and Shui Rou have been married for quite some time. Brat, when are you going to give us a chubby grandson? Xiao Chen and Qin Shuru were both stunned by Xiao Qing's sudden question. Even Qin Shuru, who had a cold personality, couldn't help but blush and roll his eyes at Xiao Chen in dissatisfaction. Xiao Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How can you blame me for this? Is giving birth something that I can do alone? However, Xiao Chen could only smile at Xiao Qing helplessly. Father, I haven't considered these things yet. Cultivation is the most important thing. Moreover, I already have a mother. Ordinary people might urge them to have children, but cultivators generally wouldn't because cultivators had a very long lifespan. However, Xiao Qing had urged them to have children. Moreover, Xiao Chen had obviously underestimated the determination of the two elders to have grandchildren. As soon as Xiao Chen finished speaking, Bai Ruyue, who was at the side, also said in dissatisfaction, "Chen, you're not young anymore. Now that your cultivation is getting higher, the chances of Shui Rou getting pregnant in the future will become smaller and smaller. It's better to hurry up. Listen to your mother on this matter. You have to hurry up. After you give birth, your father and I will help you take care of it. It won't affect your cultivation. As a cultivator's cultivation increased, the chances of getting pregnant would also become lower and lower. Everyone knew this, and this was also the rule of the heavenly Tao. Otherwise, for those saints who had a lifespan of thousands of years, if they had the same chances of getting pregnant as ordinary people, wouldn't they have children and grandchildren all over the place? The two elders kept talking. Xiaochen didn't say anything, but Qin Shuru's face became redder and redder. Qin Shuru really hadn't thought about having children. In the end, Xiaochen had no choice but to pull Qin Shuru back to the room. However, Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue's voices still sounded behind them. Qin'er, remember mother's words. It's always better to have children earlier. He completely ignored Xiaochen. In the blink of an eye, he rushed back to his room and closed the door with a bang. Qinling and Long Qing, who were still at the table, could not help but laugh when they saw Xiaochen flee in such a flustered manner. Who would have thought that Xiaochen, who was the #1 candidate of the ancient sacred sect, would actually have a day where he would be pushed to the brink of death? The two of them were secretly happy, but they clearly didn't expect what would happen next. After Xiaochen left, Bai Ruyue didn't know whether it was because she was in the mood or not, but she suddenly opened her mouth. Without Xiaochen, she could only shift her attention to Qinling and Long Qing. And the two of you. Qin'er is the third child, but he's already married. What about the two of you? Do you have someone you like? Tell your mother. After hearing Bai Ruyue's words, Qinling and Long Qing's heads were filled with black lines. Extreme joy turned to sorrow. Qinling coughed dryly and stood up. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "Ahem, mother, I still have some things to take care of. I'll take my leave first. Father and mother, enjoy your meal." After speaking, Qinling didn't wait for Bai Ruyue's reply and disappeared. Seeing this, Long Qing obviously couldn't sit still and said, Mother, I'll take my leave first." "Well, mother, I'm not feeling well, so I'll go back to my room to rest." After speaking, Long Qing also didn't wait for Bai Ruyue's reply and disappeared in a flash. Seeing the three children escape one by one, Bai Ruyue said with slight anger, "These children really don't understand the painstaking efforts of us parents. Who cares about them? Ruyue, we've been apart for a long time. Let's not waste such a beautiful scene." Facing Bai Ruyue's complaints, Xiao Qing drank the wine in his cup in one gulp and then said to Bai Ruyue with a smile, "Go away. Who's been apart for a long time?" Bai Ruyue unhappily replied, Of course it's you." Hearing this, Xiao Qing smiled. Then, without waiting for Bai Ruyue's consent, he carried her body and walked directly to the room. The family reunited and everyone slept very peacefully that night. The next morning, Xiaochen and Qin Shuru woke up and sat in front of the mirror combing their hair. Qin Shuru hadn't forgotten what Bai Ruyue said last night and nervously said to Xiaochen, who was drinking tea behind him, "Husband, are we really going to have a child? Why? Don't you want to have one?" Hearing this, Xiaochen smiled. "No, it's just that I've never thought about this problem." Qin Shuru said, "Let nature take its course. There's no need to do anything deliberately. Don't worry, I'll take care of mother." Seeing that Qin Shuru was somewhat nervous about this matter, Xiaochen also comforted him. While the two of them were talking, someone knocked on the door gently. Then, Xiaochen got up and opened the door, only to see a tall and strong woman standing outside. Xiaochen recognized this woman. She seemed to be Yu Yao, a demonic beast from the Tiger Leopard Ridge who was sent by the Tiger Emperor to protect Bai Ruyue. Now that she took the initiative to visit, Xiaochen asked, "What's wrong? Is something the matter?" After hearing Xiaochen's words, Hu Yao was obviously nervous and stuttered. "Young master, about the matter you promised the Tiger Emperor back then." She didn't dare to speak, but after hearing Hu Yao's stuttering, Xiaochen quickly recalled that in order to get the Tiger Emperor to help, Xiaochen had promised to give her and the Leopard Emperor 2 drops of dragon blood. After being reminded by Hu Yao, Xiaochen finally recalled this matter. In an instant, she felt somewhat vexed. The dragon blood. Now that Longqing had found it, how was she going to explain to Longqing if she were to give the Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor 2 drops of dragon blood? She was in a dilemma. But since she had promised, Xiaochen didn't intend to return. After all, the Tiger Emperor did save her life back then. Then, Xiaochen looked at Hu Yao and said, "Go back first and tell the Tiger Emperor that I will return to the Tiger Leopard Ridge in 2 days. I will always remember his kindness back then. Just let him rest assured." "Thank you, young master. I'll take my leave then." Hu Yao was overjoyed and left respectfully. Watching Hu Yao leave, Xiaochen's face was filled with bitterness. At the same time, Qin Shuru, who had dressed up, came to Xiaochen's side and looked at Hu Yao's back. "Hubby, what's wrong?" In the face of Qin Shuru's inquiry, Xiaochen didn't hide anything and truthfully told Qin Shuru about the promise back then. In the end, Xiaochen said with a helpless expression, "Back then, it was an emergency. I didn't ask second sister before I agreed. How am I going to tell second sister now? With second sister's temper, she definitely won't agree to give her essence blood to 2 mixed blood demonic beasts." Chapter 844. He didn't know what to say to Longqing. With Longqing's violent temper, Xiaochen could imagine how she would react. As a pure-blooded dragon, how could she be willing to give her essence blood to 2 low-level monstrous beasts? In Longqing's eyes, that would be an insult. Sighing helplessly, Qin Shuru smiled and said, "Then what will they do if you return? With my current status and strength, they can't do anything even if I return. However, the Tiger Emperor did save my life back then. Since I've received his kindness and made a promise, I naturally have to fulfill it." "I don't want to be a person who goes back on his word," Xiaochen replied seriously. It was not impossible for Xiaochen to go back on his word. That way, everything would be easily solved, and he would not have to worry about anything. However, that was impossible. Even though Xiaochen's current status meant that even if he went back on his word, the Tiger Emperor and the Panther Emperor would not be able to do anything about it, but Xiaochen himself would not be able to get past this hurdle. Gratitude must be repaid, hatred must be avenged. This was the principle of a real man walking in the world. Xiaochen wouldn't return kindness with enmity and burn the bridge after crossing the river, nor would he do such a thing. Hearing Xiaochen's answer, Qin Shuru's smile didn't fade. "In that case, there's nothing to be worried about." What do you mean?" Xiaochen was puzzled. Qin Shuru's words made Xiaochen confused. "Husband, are you confused because you're closely involved, or do you not understand second sister's personality? Although second sister is arrogant, no matter what, the Tiger Emperor did save your life back then. Moreover, you've already made a promise. Therefore, no matter how unwilling second sister is, she will definitely agree to give them 2 drops of essence blood. Therefore, husband, you don't need to worry or think too much. Just tell second sister the truth. Perhaps second sister will be angry, but she definitely won't refuse. After all, the Tiger Emperor saved her most beloved third brother," Qin Shuru said with a smile. Hearing Qin Shuru's words, Xiaochen was suddenly enlightened. That's right, he really underestimated second sister. Just as Qin Shuru said, there was no way second sister wouldn't agree. Shuru is right. I'll go look for second sister now. With a smile on his face, Xiaochen was so happy that he kissed Qin Shuru fiercely. Then, he strode towards Longqing's room. Qin Shuru's face turned red from Xiaochen's sudden sneak attack. However, Xiaochen had already left. After cursing Xiaochen in his heart, Qin Shuru also went to greet Xiaoqing and Bai Ruyue. He walked all the way to Longqing's room. It had to be said that although Qin Shuru had enlightened him, Xiaochen was still a little nervous. He didn't doubt that Longqing would definitely throw a tantrum after hearing about this matter. However, there was nothing he could do about it. Words were like water that had been spilled. If he was scolded, then so be it. He carefully walked to Longqing's door and gently knocked on the door. Soon, Longqing's voice came from the room. "Who is it?" "Second sister, it's me," Xiaochen replied softly. "Come in." After getting Longqing's permission, Xiaochen pushed the door open and entered. The moment he entered, he saw Longqing sitting in front of the dressing table combing her hair. It seemed that no matter if she was a human or a dragon, as long as she was a female, she would have a heart that loved beauty. Because he had something to ask of her, Xiaochen took the initiative to go behind Longqing when he saw this scene. He forcefully snatched the comb from Longqing's hands and gently combed Longqing's hair. "Second sister, let me help you." This was the first time that Xiaochen took the initiative to help Longqing with her makeup. She didn't even refuse. If it was someone else, even if it was Chenling, Longqing would probably throw a tantrum. However, facing Xiaochen, Longqing calmly accepted it. In this world, there was probably no one more important than Xiaochen and Longqing's heart. While enjoying Xiaochen's service, Longqing lazily said, "Little brother, you're trying to curry favor for no reason. Do you have something to ask of me?" "Of course not." "Second sister, what are you saying? We're siblings. It's only right for me to help you comb your hair. However, I do have a small matter that I need your help with," Xiaochen said with a smile. "Oh? What is it?" "Tell me," Longqing said with a smile. Xiaochen took the initiative to ask what was going on. Sensing that Longqing was in a good mood, Xiaochen probed, "It's like this. Back then, I was being hunted down in Danyang County. Fortunately, 2 beast emperors saved me, so I agreed to give each of them a drop of dragon blood essence," Xiaochen said cautiously. Longqing didn't react to the first half of the story. However, when she heard that Xiaochen agreed to give each of the 2 beast emperors a drop of dragon blood essence, Longqing jumped up from her seat abruptly and said with raging flames in her eyes, "What did you say? Give each of them a drop of dragon blood essence? How can low-level beast emperors like them be worthy of my blood essence?" As expected, Longqing lost her temper and flew into a rage. Upon seeing this, Xiaochen, who was already prepared, lowered his head and admitted his mistake immediately. "I know that you look down on these low-level beast emperors, but they did save my life back then. If it weren't for the 2 beast emperors, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to see me now." So, Xiaochen acted like an obedient child. Upon seeing this, even though Longqing was furious, she didn't know what to do for a moment. Just as Qin Shuru said, even though Longqing was angry, since the 2 beast emperors had saved Xiaochen, as Xiaochen's second sister, Longqing wasn't an ungrateful person. After staring at Xiaochen for a few moments, Longqing finally chose to surrender. She sat back on the chair and said indignantly, "Those 2 low-level beast emperors are really lucky." Upon hearing Longqing's words, Xiaochen was delighted. Then, he smiled embarrassedly. "So, second sister agrees? What else can I do? They have already saved you, so how can I say no? Not to mention 2 drops of blood essence, even if they want my life, I will give it to them." Upon hearing Xiaochen's words, Longqing scolded angrily. "Whoever dares to take second sister's life, I will be the first to kill her." Upon hearing Longqing's scolding, Xiaochen fawned over her. Upon seeing that Longqing's anger gradually dissipated, Xiaochen continued to comb Longqing's hair. After a few moments, Xiaochen probed, Second sister, since you have agreed, can you give me another drop of blood essence?" "Another drop? Are you asking for a yard after taking an inch?" Upon hearing this, Longqing didn't fly into a rage this time. Instead, she smiled playfully. However, that smile was terrifying no matter how one looked at it. Seeing that Longqing was about to get angry again, Xiaochen hurriedly explained, "No, I want to give Liao another drop. All these years, it has protected Mother. Even if it doesn't deserve any credit, it has worked hard. Since that's the case, I want to give it some compensation." Of course, if second sister doesn't agree, then forget it. Pretend I didn't say anything. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 845. She wanted to give Huyao one more drop. Hearing this, Longqing said unhappily, I think you should just cut me and let me bleed, then take it to the streets of the imperial capital to buy it. The dragon clan's blood essence can make you rich in an instant. Hearing Longqing's words, Xiaochen smiled embarrassedly and said, then forget it. Second sister, don't be angry. It has served mother for so many years. Giving it a drop of blood essence is natural. Don't pretend to be pitiful here. Alright, I'll do it myself. You're so clumsy. Once I'm done, we'll go directly to Tiger Leopard Ridge. Facing Xiaochen's fawning, the anger in Longqing's heart dissipated. She took the comb and began to straighten herself. Very quickly, Longqing finished dressing up. Then, Xiaochen asked someone to call Huyao over. Not knowing why Xiaochen called for him, Huyao came into the room and respectfully bowed to Xiaochen and Longqing. Greetings, third young master, second Mississippi, because Xiaochen, Chenling, and Longqing were now Xiaoqing and Bai Ruyue's children. The servants addressed Chenling as eldest young master and Longqing as second Mississippi. As for our comrade Xiaochen, he could only be called third young master. Of course, Xiaochen did not care about this at all. Looking at the respectful Huyao, before Xiaochen could speak, Longqing directly said, You've served mother for all these years. You've been serving mother all these years. You can be considered to have worked hard without complaint. You deserve this drop of blood essence. Take it. As she spoke, Longqing flicked her finger and a drop of blood essence the size of a fingernail was sent into Huyao's hand. Looking at the drop of blood essence on his palm, Huyao was stunned. Huyao could sense an extremely dense pressure from the drop of essence blood. Moreover, he could faintly hear the roar of a dragon. His blood vessels began to tremble uncontrollably. Just facing a drop of Longqing's blood essence, Huyao actually knelt down directly. At the same time, his eyes were filled with disbelief. Dragon Clan's blood essence, this was the Dragon Clan's blood essence. Looking at Huyao kneeling on the ground as if he was worshipping a god, Longqing didn't feel the slightest bit surprised. The pure-blooded dragon race was a godlike existence among the demon beasts. Looking at the entire world, there were only a few demon beasts that were comparable to the pure-blooded dragon race. With an indifferent expression, Longqing continued, You deserve this drop of blood essence. Take it. There's one more thing. Let me ask you. Are you willing to continue serving mother? If you're willing, little brother and I will go to Tiger Leopard Ridge to tell you. From today onwards, you're a member of my Xiao family and have nothing to do with Tiger Leopard Ridge. Are you willing? Huyao's performance these past few years was pretty good and Bai Ruyue was also very satisfied. Therefore, Longqing planned to let him stay by Bai Ruyue and Little Qing's side for a long time. Hearing this, Huyao's heart was wild with joy as he excitedly nodded his head. Thank you, second Mississippi. I'm willing to serve Madam for the rest of my life. Until now, how could Huyao not know that the second miss in front of him was the pure-blooded dragon race that Xiaochen spoke of back then? To be able to follow a pure-blooded dragon was definitely an extremely glorious thing. Moreover, it was also something that all demon beasts dreamed of. Hearing Huyao's answer, Longqing nodded her head and said, Okay, you can leave. Huyao respectfully bowed and left. Even after leaving the room, Huyao still felt like he was in a dream. He never thought that one day, he would be lucky enough to obtain a drop of dragon blood essence. With this drop of dragon blood essence, Huyao's bloodline power would complete a qualitative leap. At that time, he wouldn't be inferior to the Tiger Emperor, and he would have the possibility of breaking through to the Beast Emperor realm. After dealing with Huyao's matter, Longqing rolled her eyes at Xiaochen, then stood up and said, Let's go. We'll first pay our respects to father and mother, then set off for Tiger Leopard Ridge. With that, Longqing took the lead and walked out of the room, while Xiaochen followed closely behind. They walked all the way to the hall. When Xiaochen and Longqing walked in, Qin Shuru and Qinling were already there. The family was chatting. Seeing Xiaochen and Qinling walk over, Qin Shuru smiled at Xiaochen, as if to say, "How is it? Were you scolded by second sister?" After respectfully paying his respects to the two elders, Xiaochen said, "Father, mother, I'll be going out with second sister in a while." "Where are you going?" Hearing this, Bairuyue asked with a smile. "We're going to Tiger Leopard Ridge. Back then, the Tiger Emperor saved my life. Now that I'm back, I naturally have to go back and take a look. At the same time, I'll fulfill my promise." Xiaochen replied truthfully. "I see. Then be careful on the way. Go early and come back early." Hearing this, Bairuyue did not refuse. Bairuyue was also involved in the incident back then, so she knew what happened. After obtaining Bairuyue's agreement, Xiaochen and Longqing left. As for Qinling and Qin Shuru, they stayed at home. There was no transportation array from the Moonless Empire to Tiger Leopard Ridge. However, with Xiaochen and Longqing's speed, it did not take long for them to arrive. In less than an hour, the two of them entered the Demonic Beast Ridge. According to his memory, Xiaochen arrived at the Demonic Beast Village where the Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor were. Looking at the village that landed in front of them, Longqing's expression changed. Then, a thick Dragon Clan's aura spread out from Longqing's body. This Dragon Clan's aura instantly enveloped the entire Demonic Beast Village. Soon, the demonic beasts in the village were all alarmed. One by one, they uncontrollably knelt on the ground. The Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor, who were in the central hall of the village, were also shocked. Then, in a flash, they appeared at the entrance of the village. Looking at Xiaochen and Longqing before them, the Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor's hearts trembled. At the same time, Xiaochen said with a smile, "The two of you, I'm here to fulfill my promise back then. This is my second sister. I don't think I need to tell you her identity, right?" Naturally, Xiaochen did not need to say anything else. Before Xiaochen could even finish his words, the Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor both knelt in front of Longqing. Their faces were filled with respect and nervousness. Looking at the Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor kneeling before her, Longqing slowly withdrew her Dragon Clan's aura. At the same time, the two Beast Emperors felt a little better. Previously, when they were suppressed by Longqing's Dragon Clan's aura, the two Beast Emperors could only feel cold sweat dripping down their backs. The suppression that came from the depths of their bloodline made it impossible for them to resist. Now that the Dragon Clan's aura had dissipated, the two Beast Emperors respectfully said, "Greetings, Lord Dragon Clan." As they spoke, the two Beast Emperors continued to kowtow. It felt as though they were extremely respectful. Upon seeing this, Longqing spoke in an unhurried tone. "All right, let's find a quieter place to talk." This was the entrance of the village and there were demonic beasts everywhere. After hearing Longqing's words, the two Beast Emperors respectfully replied, "Yes, Lord Dragon Clan, please. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 846. They respectfully invited Longqing and Xiaochen into the palace in the center of the village. It was still the same as before. However, this time, the Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor did not dare to sit on the high seats. Instead, the throne that originally belonged to them now belonged to Longqing and Xiaochen. They sat side by side on the high throne while the Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor knelt down respectfully. Seeing this, Longqing said indifferently, "Get up. There's no need to kneel. We don't dare." Hearing this, the Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor replied in unison, "All right, you're my saviors. There's no need to be like this. Get up." Hearing this, Longqing said again. The Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor finally stood up after having the both of them stand up twice in a row. However, looking at their expressions, they were still extremely nervous. There was nothing they could do about it. The person sitting in front of them right now was a pure-blooded dragon. The Tiger Emperor and the Leopard Emperor would never forget that oppressive aura of the dragon race just now. They did not dare to look Long Qing in the eyes. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, Xiaochen said with a smile. Tiger Emperor, if you hadn't saved us back then, my mother and I would have been killed by the Blood Wolf King. Speaking of which, I really have to thank you. Xiaochen did not forget the favor of saving his life back then. Naturally, the Tiger Emperor did not forget it either. However, hearing these words now, the Tiger Emperor did not dare to be arrogant. Instead, he replied respectfully. Young Master Xiao, you're too courteous. I've long forgotten about what happened back then. Furthermore, it's my honor to be able to help young Master Xiao. He did not dare to make an issue out of what happened back then, nor did he dare to take the initiative to mention Xiaochen's promise back then. However, even though the Tiger Emperor said that he had forgotten, Xiaochen would not. Hearing this, Xiaochen said with a smile, Tiger Emperor, you must be joking. A favor is a favor. This is the truth. Even if you've forgotten, my second sister and I will never forget. Therefore, it's time to fulfill the promise back then. When they heard Xiaochen mention making a promise, the Tiger King and Panther King's hearts tightened. They naturally knew what this promise was. 2 drops of dragon race blood essence. After so many years, they had never forgotten about these 2 drops of dragon blood essence. After thinking about it day and night, they finally got it. However, it was completely different from what they had imagined. Today, when they finally faced Long Qing, the Tiger King and the Leopard King realized that the pressure of facing a pure-blooded dragon was so great that it was hard to breathe. They were excited, agitated, and nervous. Unknowingly, their backs were drenched in cold sweat. At the same time, Long Qing continued Xiaochen's words. I've already heard about what happened back then from my younger brother. Indeed, I have to thank all of you. If it weren't for all of you, my younger brother and mother wouldn't have been able to escape so smoothly. Therefore, I also want to thank all of you here. Long Qing took the initiative to thank them. Hearing this, the Tiger King and the Leopard King knelt down again. Without any hesitation, they knelt down for the second time with their heads deeply pressed against the ground. However, at this time, the 2 of them were incomparably proud. The gratitude of a pure-blooded dragon race was enough for the 2 of them to brag about for the rest of their lives. Let alone beast kings, even demonic beasts that had broken through to the Saint Beast realm couldn't receive the gratitude of a pure-blooded dragon race. The Saint Beast realm was equivalent to the human saint realm. However, there were no demonic beasts in the Saint Beast realm in the Tiana continent. In the past, there were, but they were all killed by human saints. As a result, the Tiana continent was dominated by humans, and demonic beasts could only obey humans. They knelt on the ground nervously and excitedly. Seeing this, Long Qing gestured for the 2 of them to get up again. Then, with a flick of his finger, 2 drops of blood essence were sent to them. Accept it. This is what you deserve. It's also my way of repaying you for saving my life back then, Long Qing said. Hearing this, the 2 beast kings respectfully accepted the 2 drops of blood essence and said respectfully, Thank you, Lord Dragon Race. In order to repay the debt of saving his life back then, the arrogant Long Qing not only gave them 2 drops of blood essence, but also personally thanked the Tiger Emperor and Leopard Emperor. Qin Shuru was right. Long Qing wasn't an unreasonable person, nor was he an ungrateful person. Of course, there was another reason why he was able to do this, and it was also the most important reason, Xiaochen. Xiaochen's importance in Long Qing's heart was self-evident. No one could compare to him. Since the Tiger Emperor had once saved Xiaochen's life, in Long Qing's heart, they had a certain place. Therefore, Long Qing put aside his arrogance and personally thanked the 2 of them. After giving away the blood essence and fulfilling his promise back then, Long Qing prepared to leave. However, before he left, Long Qing said to the Tiger Emperor and Leopard Emperor, Let's not talk about what happened back then. Little brother and I will always remember it in our hearts. However, we can't stay here for long, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of father and mother. Don't let them come to any danger. Of course, we won't mistreat you in the future. Xiao Chen and the others would have to return to the ancient sacred sect in a few days. Therefore, Long Qing wanted the demonic beasts of the Tiger and Leopard Ridge to take care of Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue. Hearing this, the Tiger Emperor and Leopard Emperor naturally wouldn't refuse. In fact, even if Long Qing didn't say it, they would definitely do so. Although they didn't know the reason why Long Qing, as a pure-blooded dragon tribe, recognized Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue as her parents, since Long Qing had said that they were her parents, the Tiger Emperor and Leopard Emperor naturally wouldn't let anything happen to them. Therefore, after hearing Long Qing's words, the two beast emperors immediately replied respectfully, "Lord Dragon Tribe, don't worry. We definitely won't let the two elders come to any danger." "Okay, that's good." Long Qing nodded and then left with Xiao Chen. Only after Xiao Chen and Long Qing left did the two beast emperors heave a sigh of relief. However, they were extremely excited. The blood essence of the dragon tribe. The blood essence of the dragon tribe that they had yearned for day and night was finally in their hands. Furthermore, they had managed to ride on the coattails of a pure-blooded dragon tribe. As long as they did their jobs well and satisfied Long Qing, they believed that there would be even more benefits in the future. For a moment, the Tiger Emperor and Leopard Emperor unhesitatingly became Long Qing's ultimate lackeys. The world of monstrous beasts was like this. It wasn't as complicated as the world of humans, where everything was determined by the power of the bloodline. Since Long Qing was born a pure-blooded dragon tribe, she was destined to stand at the top of the entire monstrous beast world. Unless there was a huge difference in cultivation, any monstrous beast would be willing to listen to her arrangements. On the way back to the Moonless Empire's imperial capital, Long Qing smiled and said, "How is it? Are you satisfied now?" Thank you so much, second sister. In the future, I will definitely do anything for you to repay your kindness," Xiao Chen said with a smile after hearing her words. "Scram! Who wants you to be my slave? I'll be fine as long as you don't screw me over in the future." Long Qing laughed and scolded him when she heard that. As they joked around, the siblings quickly flew towards the Moonless Empire's imperial capital. "Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 847. Long Qing said angrily. Afterwards, the two of them returned to the capital of the Moonless Empire. After spending a total of 3 days in the Moonless Empire, Xiao Chen planned to return to the ancient sacred sect. However, before he left, Xiao Chen had to make a trip to the imperial palace. There were some things that he needed to tell Chu Wuming. The invasion of the devil race was imminent, and Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing were currently in the Moonless Empire. Therefore, Xiao Chen needed to tell Chu Wuming to make preparations in advance. Of course, Xiao Chen didn't believe that the devil race could reach the Moonless Empire because if the devil race really did appear in the Moonless Empire, then there was only one possibility. The ancient sacred sect had been defeated and the entire ancient sacred plane had fallen. If even the ancient sacred sect couldn't stop the devil race, then it was even more impossible for the tiny Moonless Empire to do so. However, even though that was the case, he still needed to make necessary preparations. Actually, Xiao Chen had thought about bringing Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing to the ancient sacred sect, but after considering it over and over again, Xiao Chen gave up in the end. Although at first glance, it seemed that the ancient sacred sect was safer than the Moonless Empire, in fact, this was not the case because once the devil race invaded, the ancient sacred sect, the heavenly sacred sect, and the sun sacred sect would definitely be the first targets. At that time, the ancient sacred sect would be the center of the war. As a result, instead of bringing Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing to the ancient sacred sect, it was better for them to stay in the Moonless Empire. After all, even though the Moonless Empire was weak, it was located in a remote area. As long as the ancient sacred sect didn't fall, the devil race clearly wouldn't care about the tiny Moonless Empire. Xiao Chen had already thought of this problem, so he decided to leave Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing in the Moonless Empire in the end. It was much safer here than in the ancient sacred sect. They prepared to leave the next day. On this evening, Xiaochen went to the imperial palace by himself. As for Qin Shiru, Chen Ling, and Long Qing, they stayed at home. Perhaps because Chu Wuming had already informed him, Xiaochen was not stopped or questioned at all. He went directly to the back garden of the palace. When Xiaochen appeared, Chu Wuming had been waiting here for a long time. Seeing Xiaochen come over, Chu Wuming took the initiative to greet him. "Brother Xiaochen." The two of them entered the garden together. Chu Wuming had already prepared the wine. They sat opposite each other and drank the wine while Xiaochen spoke. "Brother Chu, I'll be returning to the ancient sacred sect tomorrow. I've come here today for 2 reasons. Firstly, I want to get drunk with you. Secondly, I have something to remind you of." "Oh, Brother Xiao, please speak." Hearing this, Chu Wuming nodded and replied. Xiaochen was about to leave. Chu Wuming was not surprised about this. After all, with Xiaochen's identity, it was naturally impossible for him to stay in a remote place like the Moonless Empire for a long time. What Chu Wuming did not expect was that before leaving, Xiaochen actually had something to tell him. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiaochen's expression became serious, and then he said very seriously, "Brother Chu, I'm afraid that the Tiana continent will not be peaceful in the near future. There are some things that I can't tell you for the time being, but I want you to prepare in advance, especially for the protection of the imperial capital." Xiaochen did not say anything about the impending invasion of the demon race. He just asked Chu Wuming to prepare in advance. Hearing Xiaochen's words, although Chu Wuming did not know what happened, he did not refuse. In the face of Xiaochen's words, Chu Wuming now unconditionally complied. Immediately, Chu Wuming stated that he would mobilize the army back to the imperial capital. At the same time, he would also issue a decree to strengthen the defense work in the Moonless Empire. Hearing Chu Wuming's answer, Xiaochen nodded with a smile. That was good. In fact, the Moonless Empire did not need to do anything. Anyway, there was the ancient sacred sect in front of them. The reason why Xiaochen reminded Chu Wuming was entirely to prevent some rascals from causing trouble. It could be imagined that once the demon race invaded, the entire Tiana continent would fall into chaos, and the former order would be gone. At that time, the 3 sacred sects would also put all their energy into resisting the demon race. Obviously, they would have no way to care about other things. Therefore, Xiaochen asked Chu Wuming to make preparations in advance. He was afraid that Xiaoqing and Bai Ruiyue would be hurt in the chaos. After instructing Chu Wuming, the two chatted for a while. When night fell, Xiaochen also left the palace. The matters in the Moonless Empire were all settled. After spending the night with Xiaoqing and Bai Ruiyue, early the next morning, Xiaochen brought Qin Shiru, Chen Ling, and Long Qing out of the Moonless Empire and returned to the ancient sacred sect. Of course, Chu Wuming naturally came to see them off personally. Through the teleportation array, the group smoothly arrived at the ancient sacred sect. Since Xiaochen was already the first candidate of the ancient sacred sect, there was naturally no problem for him to bring Chen Ling and Long Qing back to the ancient sacred sect. In addition, the demon race's invasion was imminent. The various saints were obviously not in the mood to care about such trivial matters. Therefore, Chen Ling and Long Qing smoothly stayed in Xiaochen's cave residence. On the second day after Xiaochen and the group returned to the ancient sacred sect, early in the morning, Randeng Kozai came to pick up Xiaosheng. No one knew what he was going to do. It was not until evening that Xiaosheng returned to the cave residence. Sitting across from each other in the main hall, Xiaosheng looked at Xiaochen and said, "Kid, it seems that you can only delay comprehending the power of laws for a while. The 3 sacred sects have already decided that they will launch an attack on the Sacredine sect in the next few days. After destroying the Sacredine sect, they will move everyone out of the Sacredine province." Originally, Xiaochen had planned to start comprehending the power of laws when he returned this time, but now that he heard Xiaosheng's words, it seemed that it was impossible. Previously, the main reason why Randeng Kozai and Prime Saint Ice Lotus personally went to the Sacred Sun sect was to discuss this matter. In fact, ever since they learned that Prime Saint Inu had constructed the Blood Door, Randang Kozai and the others had secretly sent people to infiltrate the Sacredine sect. Today, Randang Kozai and the others had completed their deployment. There were experts from the three sacred sects hiding in the various cities and sects of the Sacredine sect. Once the three sacred sects launched their attack, those experts who had been hiding in the Sacredine sect would immediately react and move everyone out of the Sacredine province as quickly as possible. Of course, the matter of destroying the Sacredine sect would naturally be completed by the saints of the three sacred sections. With the combined power of the three sacred sects, destroying the Sacredine sect shouldn't be too much of a problem. Hearing Xiaoxing's words, Xiaochen pondered for a moment before nodding. Then let's go to the Sacredine province first and save Ling Yao first. As for the other matters, we'll talk about them later. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 848. The three great sacred sects' operation to destroy the Sacredine sect was about to begin. In this regard, Xiaochen naturally didn't have time to comprehend the power of law, because the power of law wasn't something that could be comprehended as one wished. It depended on one's luck. He was very worried about Gu Lingyao. After all, she was alone in the Sacredine sect, and he didn't know how she was doing. Of course, there was also the 100-flower fairy. Now that Qin Shuru and Xiao Qing had been found, only the 100-flower fairy was still unknown. Thus, he immediately gave up on comprehending the power of law. Regarding Xiao Chen's decision, Xiaoxing wasn't surprised and nodded slightly. I've also told Randang about the little girl. When the time comes to attack the Sacredine sect, the others will also pay attention to her. Hearing Xiaoxing's words, Xiaochen nodded slightly. Since the three great sacred sects were ready to take action, the fact that the demon race was about to invade couldn't be hidden for long. The three great sacred sects should soon announce this matter to the world. The development of the situation was much faster than Xiaochen imagined. Moreover, once the matter of the demon race's invasion was made public, the entire Sky River continent would definitely be shaken. At that time, it might become very chaotic. Of course, these things weren't something that Xiaochen could control. Now, Xiaochen only had one thing in mind, and that was to safely rescue Gu Lingyao and find the whereabouts of the 100-flower fairy. As for the rest, he could only take one step at a time. Just as Xiaochen thought, only 3 days later, the three great sacred sects really made the matter of the demon race's invasion public. At the same time, they also severely reprimanded the Sacredine sect for their actions. It was all because the Sacredine sect had forcibly constructed the blood gate that the demon race of the northern demon continent had the opportunity to descend on the Sky River continent. Along with this news, everyone in the Sky River continent was incomparably shocked. The demon race's invasion was a matter of life and death for the Sky River continent. Faced with such news, many cultivators in the Sky River continent were shocked, and small-scale riots broke out in various places. However, the three sacred sects were clearly prepared for this. Anyone who dared to use this opportunity to cause chaos would be severely punished by the three sacred sects. The invasion of the demon race was imminent, so the Heavenly River continent couldn't afford to fall into chaos. The three holy sects were very clear about this, so they were extremely decisive and iron-blooded in suppressing these small-scale disturbances. Of course, it was precisely because of such tough means and countermeasures that large-scale chaos did not break out in the Sky River continent, and the overall situation was still under control. While announcing the invasion of the demon race, the three sacred sects also began to attack the Sacredine sect. The saints of the Ancient Saints sect were all present. At the same time, Qin Yu and the other chosen saints, as well as Xiao Chen and the other candidates, had been summoned to the Sacred Hall. Xiao Chen and Qin Yu came to the Sacred Hall together, but when the two arrived, the Sacred Hall was already full. The saints, Emperor Qing, Hu Fei, Jian Yu, Yuan Lin, Du Yi, and the others were all present. The saints, chosen saints, and chosen saints were all gathered together. This was the first time Xiaochen had seen such a lineup since he entered the Ancient Saints sect. In the seats below the saints, Xiaochen and Qinyu came to their own praying mats and sat down cross-legged. Xiaochen was the first chosen saint, and his seat was at the head of the 5 chosen saints. When everyone was present, Randang Kozai, who was sitting on the main seat, took the lead to speak. Everyone, the invasion of the demon race is a foregone conclusion. The blood gate has been formed, and there is no way to destroy it. Today, the purpose of gathering everyone here is to attack the Sacredine sect. Before the demon race invades, we must completely eradicate the Sacredine sect. Everyone present already knew about the demon race's invasion. Moreover, due to their identities, they knew more details about it. Ancient Saint Randang went straight to the point. Upon hearing this, Saint Qingju, who was seated below, spoke up. Master, if we destroy the Sacredine sect this time, what about their disciples? There are nearly 100,000 disciples in the Sacredine sect. It's impossible that all of them participated in the construction of the Blood Gate, right? He wasn't worried about whether the attack on the Sacredine sect would fail or not. After all, this time the 3 Sacredine sects had joined forces. With such a powerful force, the Sacredine sect couldn't resist. However, the only problem now was that the construction of the Blood Door and the intention to destroy the Heavenly River continent was led by ancient sage Yu. Only a small number of people were involved. So, what about those innocent disciples of the Sacredine sect? Hearing Saint Qingju's words, Randang Kozai said in a deep voice, there are nearly 100,000 disciples in the Sacredine sect. If we want to identify them one by one, there won't be enough time. So, our purpose this time is to destroy the Sacredine sect. From the top to the bottom of the Sacredine sect, we won't leave even a chicken or a dog alive. Whether they know or not, whether they participated or not, as long as they're from the Sacredine sect, we won't let a single one go. It was impossible to have the energy and time to identify the disciples of the Sacredine sect one by one. One had to know that the Sacredine sect had nearly 100,000 disciples. If they were to identify them one by one, there wouldn't be enough time. Moreover, facing the current situation, the 3 Sacredine sects could only cut the Gordian knot. Although this might be a little cruel, there was no other way. The Sacredine sect couldn't be left alive. So, they could only uproot the entire Sacredine sect. Hearing Randang Kozai's words, everyone present didn't have any objections. Although they knew that if they killed everyone in the Sacredine sect, blood would definitely flow like a river, but there was no other way. If they didn't destroy the Sacredine sect, when the demon race invaded, it would only make the situation of the 3 Sacredine sects even more dangerous. For the safety of the Tiana continent, they couldn't care less about these things at this time, let alone have the slightest bit of mercy. Seeing that no one had any objections, Randang Kozai continued. This time, my ancient Sacredine sect will dispatch 10 saints, 20 half-saints, as well as holy sons and quasi-holy sons. As for the direct disciples, core disciples, and ordinary disciples, we will dispatch 20,000 people. We must concentrate our strength and destroy the Sacredine sect as soon as possible. We must evacuate all the people in the Sacredine province. 20,000 disciples, 10 saints, 20 half-saints, as well as quasi-holy sons and holy sons, all dispatched. Hearing Randang Kozai's words, everyone's heart sank. This was really a big move. Almost half of the ancient Sacredine sect's strength had been mobilized in order to destroy the Sacredine sect as soon as possible. Of course, it wasn't just the ancient Sacredine sect. The Sky Sacredine sect and the Sun Sacredine sect were the same. As soon as his voice fell, Randang Kozai slowly stood up from the praying mat and looked around at everyone present. Then, a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes as he said in a heavy tone. This time, there can't be any mistakes. We will set off in 3 days. Starting from the west side of the Sacredine sect, we will kill all the way to the Sacredine sect. Everyone, remember, this battle is related to the survival of the Tiana continent. There can't be the slightest bit of mercy. Whether it's the disciples of the Sacredine sect, the half-saint deacons, or the saints, none of them will be left alive. begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 849. From the saints to the ordinary disciples, no one from the Sacredine sect would be spared. Along with Randang Kozai's words, a murderous aura spread out from his body. It was easy to imagine what kind of scene would occur in the Sacredine sect once this war broke out. At that time, blood would flow like rivers. It had been a long time since they had felt such a strong murderous aura from Randang Kozai. After being stunned for a moment, all the saints nodded in agreement. 3 days later, the attack on the Sacredine sect would begin. The saints, holy sons, and quasi-holy sons would take the lead. As for the half-saint deacons and other disciples, they would follow behind. Of course, Randang Kozai would naturally participate in this war, but his task was to deal with the Inu Prime Saint. After withdrawing from the Holy Temple, Shaochen sighed and said, "I'm afraid there won't be any peaceful days in the future." "What's wrong? Does senior brother find it troublesome?" Hearing Qinyu's words, Shaochen asked with a smile. "It's definitely troublesome. I'm just thinking, after this war, even if we successfully block the demon race, how many people from the Tiana continent will survive?" Qinyu replied with a smile. Hearing this, Shaochen fell silent. After the destruction of the Sacredine sect and the invasion of the demon race, the Tiana continent would most likely be plunged into the flames of war. And after this war, just as Qinyu said, how many cultivators on the Tiana continent would be able to survive? It had been many years since a war had broken out on the Tiana continent. People who lived in peaceful times often viewed war as a beautiful thing. They simply didn't know the cruelty of war. As the saying goes, it's better to be a dog in peace than a man in chaos. In war, human life was simply the cheapest thing, not worth mentioning at all. Shaochen and Qinyu both sighed helplessly. At this point, the two of them couldn't change anything. Moreover, it was impossible for the human race and the demon race to coexist. The demon race wouldn't give up their invasion of the Sky River continent, and the human race wouldn't give up their homeland. Therefore, a war between the two sides was inevitable. After returning to the first sacred palace and bidding farewell to Qinyu, Shaochen called Qinling, Long Qing, and Qin Shuru over and told them about the attack on the Sacredine sect. Qinling and Long Qing naturally had to move together with Shaochen. This had already been approved by the ancient saint sect. However, Qin Shuru was the disciple of the ancient Saint Ice Lotus. Logically speaking, she should move together with the people of the heavenly saint sect. However, just before Shaochen returned, Qin Shuru had already contacted the ancient Saint Ice Lotus through a voice transmission talisman, and the ancient Saint Ice Lotus had also agreed to let her follow Shaochen. The three sacred sects only had one goal for this attack on the Sacredine sect, and that was to end the battle quickly. Therefore, Qin Shuru wanting to follow Shaochen was actually not a big deal. Since Qin Shuru had already reached an agreement with the ancient Saint Ice Lotus, Shaochen didn't say anything more. This time, the Holy Sun, the prospective Holy Sun, and the saints would take the lead in attack from the west of the Sacredine sect, while the Heavenly Saint sect and the Sacred Sun sect would attack from the north and south respectively. The three sacred sects would converge at the Sacredine sect and take down the Sacredine sect in one fell swoop. 3 days passed very quickly, and during this period, the ancient sacred sect had also begun to move frequently. One disciple after another went to the border of the ancient sacred sect, preparing to board a warship to attack the Sacredine sect. Because the transmission array had been completely destroyed by the Sacredine sect, it was naturally impossible to use the transmission array to reach the Sacredine sect. Therefore, the people of the three sacred sects could only use the warships to cross the endless sea quickly to reach the Sacredine sect. Without the transmission array, it would take at least half a month to cross the endless sea, and this was even if everyone was rushing. Of course, the saints' speed was naturally much faster because they could tear through space, and their speed was much faster than the warships. However, the saints couldn't bring too many people with them when they were rushing. Therefore, Randang Kozai decided that the 10 saints would lead the Holy Sons, and the prospective Holy Sons would take the lead, while the others would arrive later on the warships. Battleships sailed out of the port one after another, heading towards the Sacredine province. Not only did the ancient sacred sect do so, but the heavenly sacred sect and the sun sacred sect also did the same. Following the movements of the three sacred sects, the entire heavenly river continent was shrouded in the clouds of war, and the atmosphere instantly became solemn. Everyone knew that the first great war would soon break out in the heavenly river continent, and the three sacred sects would join forces to destroy the Sacredine sect. When the time came, the entire Sacredine sect would be enveloped in the flames of war. There was no need to travel with ordinary disciples. 3 days later, on the main square outside the ancient sacred sect's sacred palace, Shaochen, Qinyu, and the other holy sons and prospective holy sons had all gathered. In front of them, there were 10 saints standing proudly. These 10 saints were the strongest force to attack the Sacredine sect this time. Among them, Saint Qingju and Saint Tianfeng were also present. Of course, besides Shaochen, Qinshuru, Qinling, and Longqing were also present. Let's go! When everyone had gathered, one of the saints said indifferently. Hearing this, the other saints nodded slightly. Then, the saints acted, and the power of laws descended, quickly enveloping Shaochen, Qinyu, and the others. Then, under the leadership of the saints, the crowd tore through the void and disappeared. This was the first time Shaochen had sent a message through the void. The surroundings were pitch black, and he couldn't see anything at all. Hurrying through the void was indeed very fast. With the saints leading the way, it only took 5 days for everyone to reach the west of the Sacredine sect from the ancient sacred sect. After rushing through the dark void for 5 days, everyone finally arrived at the Sacredine sect. They tore through the void, and from afar, they could see a coastline at the end of the void. That was where the Sacredine sect was located. Our first battle on this trip is Black Rock City, the westernmost city of the Sacredine sect. This city isn't a big one, and there won't be too many experts guarding it. Therefore, we must take down this city as soon as possible to provide a foothold for the rest of the army. When we arrive at Black Rock City, Qinyu, Emperor Qing, Hu Fei, and Jiangyu, the 4 of you will split up and lead Shaochen and the others to seize the 2 city gates of Black Rock City as soon as possible. After seizing control of the city gates, immediately close them. No one is allowed to enter or leave. As for the experts of the Sacredine sect in Black Rock City, we will deal with them. Saint Qingju, who had already arrived at the Sacredine sect, said. In this battle, Shaochen and the other chosen saints' mission was to seize the 2 city gates of Black Rock City as soon as possible. Hearing this, everyone nodded in unison. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 850. Black Rock City could be considered as the bridgehead for the ancient sacred sect to attack the Sacredine sect. Occupying it would not only provide a foothold for the subsequent armies, but the evacuation would also be completed through Black Rock City. Therefore, the importance of Black Rock City was self-evident. Hearing Saint Qingju's words, Qinyu, Shaochen, and the other chosens and prospective chosens nodded in agreement. Then, everyone flew towards Black Rock City. Such obvious movements from the 3 sacred sects naturally could not be hidden from the Sacredine sect. However, the Sacredine sect no longer had the ability to take care of everything in the face of the 3 sacred sects' attack. Just as Saint Qingju had said, the Sacredine sect did not leave any experts to guard Black Rock City. There was only a half-step Saint Deacon here. A mere half-step saint would naturally not be able to withstand the attacks of the ancient sacred sect's saints, chosens, and prospective chosens. On this day, a terrifying pressure suddenly descended from the sky in the small border city that no one paid attention to. At the same time, Saint Qingju and the others appeared in the sky. Following the appearance of the ancient sacred sect's experts, the expressions of everyone in Black Rock City changed drastically. At the same time, Saint Qingju immediately said to Qinyu and the others, "Let's move. Seal off Black Rock City. No one is allowed to enter or leave." The saints would deal with the experts of the Sacredine sect. Xiao Chen and the others' mission was only to seize the city gates and seal off the entire Black Rock City. Hearing Saint Qingju's words, Qin Yu and Jian Yu led Xiao Chen, Long Qing, Chen Ling, and Qin Shuru towards the east gate of Black Rock City. The entire Black Rock City had two gates, east and west. Just as the Chosens and prospective Chosens began to move, Saint Qingju and the other saints also began to move and headed straight for the city lord's mansion. Soon after, waves of battle rippled out from the city lord's mansion. However, the battle only lasted for a short period of time. Under the attack of 10 saints, the city lord's mansion, which only had a half-step Saint Deacon, was clearly unable to resist. In just an instant, the city lord's mansion was conquered by the saints. At the same time, the east and west gates were completely occupied by Xiao Chen and the other Chosens and prospective Chosens. Those who were in charge of attacking the east gate did not encounter much resistance. Those who were in charge of guarding the gate were basically cultivators with low cultivation. In terms of battle strength, they were even weaker than ordinary disciples. So Xiao and the others almost instantly. According to Saint Qingju's orders. Chosens and Chosens. Chosens Chosens. Randeng Cozy Eyes. Saint Chosens. Chosens Chosens. B. Chosens in Chosen City. Chosens. Standing on top of the city wall, Xiao Chen could vaguely hear the screams coming from the city. After the saints had taken down the city lord's residence, they had begun to clean up the disciples of the Holy Yin sect. While Xiao Chen was in a daze, Chen Yu came to Xiao Chen's side and asked softly, "What's wrong? Have you softened your heart?" He knew that rivers of blood would flow in Black Rock City and this was only the beginning. Hearing this, Xiao Chen shook his head and replied, "This is something that can't be helped. The Sacredine sect cannot be left alive. There's no need to be soft-hearted." Although he knew that most of the disciples of the Sacredine sect were innocent, Xiao Chen really didn't have a soft heart. The Sacredine sect couldn't be left alive. They had to be uprooted. Therefore, Xiao Chen didn't have the slightest objection to the actions of the saints, nor did he have a trace of dissatisfaction. Xiao Chen also knew that the saints would not kill the innocent. Other than those related to the Sacredine sect, the saints would not harm the ordinary people living in Black Rock City. The purge of the disciples of the Sacredine sect took about 3 days. In the end, the saints found and killed all the disciples of the Sacredine sect, including those who hid their identities and tried to get away with it. Thousands of people were killed. Of course, this was considered a small number. After all, Black Rock City was just a small city. The Sacredine sect didn't invest much power here. After completely killing the people of the Sacredine sect, Black Rock City fell into the control of the ancient sacred sect. After waiting for a few more days, huge warships appeared on the sea. This was the army of the ancient sacred sect. It was an army of 20 half-saint attendants and 20,000 disciples. The army finally arrived and disembarked on the shore of Black Rock City. Following the arrival of the main force of the ancient sacred sect, the cultivators in Black Rock City were also transferred to the ancient sacred province and left on the warships of the ancient sacred sect. This time, the 3 sacred sects launched an attack at the same time. Firstly, they wanted to completely destroy the Sacredine sect. Secondly, they wanted to move the people of the Sacredine province to the other 3 provinces to deal with the future invasion of the demon race. Knowing that the invasion of the demon race was imminent, the people of Black Rock City didn't resist moving to the ancient sacred sect. On the contrary, they were extremely cooperative. They weren't stupid. They knew that if they continued to stay in the Sacredine sect, they would be cannon fodder. Once the demon race arrived, the Sacredine province would bear the brunt of the battlefield. At that time, the entire Sacredine province would be engulfed by the flames of war. Continuing to stay here was tantamount to throwing away their lives. Everyone was very cooperative. The work of moving the people naturally went smoothly. Of course, Xiao Chen didn't need to take care of these things. There were naturally people in charge of it. The guarding of the two city gates had been handed over to the other disciples of the ancient sacred sect. Xiaochen and the others gathered in the city lord's mansion to discuss the next step. According to the Sacredine sect's plan, the attack on the Sacredine sect this time was to cover the entire area. With Black Rock City as the starting point, they would advance towards the core area of the Sacredine sect in a fan shape. They would cooperate with the Sacred Sun sect and the Sacred Sky sect in the other two directions to force the Sacredine sect into a corner. Finally, they would launch an all-out attack and destroy the Sacredine sect in one fell swoop. Starting from Black Rock City, they would take down all the major cities in the Sacredine province. At the same time, the migration work would be carried out continuously. Naturally, no one would object to the Sacredine sect's plan. Therefore, the next step was to divide the forces. From Black Rock City to the core area of the Sacredine sect, they would have to face 3 cities. They planned to divide the forces into 3 groups and attack the 3 cities at the same time. At the same time, after taking down the 3 cities, they would still follow the same old rules. They would clean up the disciples of the Sacredine sect and bring the others back to Black Rock City. They would then take the battleships from Black Rock City to the ancient sacred province. After a series of discussions, Jianyu, Xiaochen, Longqing, Chenling, and Qinshuru were arranged to follow St. Tianfeng and St. Qingju to attack a place called Baishu City. Of course, it wasn't just them. The half-saint deacons and other disciples of the ancient sacred sect would also move together. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.